OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Right, very welcome along. It's Monday morning. We are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. It's Ger and Nathan with you all the way through until 10 this morning. How are you, Nathan?
I'm all right.
Busy weekend for you?
Well, quiet weekend, Ger. Feet up, front of the fire for the weekend. Where else would you want to be?
Well, according to your Instagram feed, which was lit, you were hanging out with Glenn Hansard and the Stars.
All the stars. Well, not so much hanging out as stalking, I would say, Glenn Hansard. You know, what, 1,000 different acts to go and see, and I just went to see Glenn Hansard twice.
Did you know
most enjoyable.
Did you know he was playing twice?
First time I went down to Electric Picnic on a Friday night and was wandering around and was right down the far end, I think, through Trench Town, and spotted just a little sort of circus tent. Had a look in. Didn't look like there was much going on. Lo and behold, Glenn Hansard's just sitting there playing a few songs. There was about 20 people in there. Nothing happened. I thought I'd sit here for an hour and enjoy this. Went back the night afterwards, after finding the world's greatest snug in a similar part of Electric Picnic. We found 6 snugs together, myself and Adrian Barry. They were basically just on the back of trailers. Each bar, tiny little bar, and then a snug that could seat 4 people. One bar served beer, one served gin, one served whiskey, one served rum. And you could just go around between them. So we went around between them. And then we said we'd go back and watch Glenn Hansard. And this time there was about 2,000 people trying to get at Glenn Hansard. And it was a bit of a struggle. But yeah, it was a most enjoyable trip to Electric Picnic despite the rain.
And they let you in because you had been there the night before and were like, OG.
Oh, obviously. How was your Electric Picnic experience?
Pretty good, yeah. Limited, up and down on the same day. But I actually didn't really want to go. All week I was like, this is going to be too much. Really, what? I mean, first off, we're too old. I'm using, not the royal we, you and me, too old for this. But actually, you get down there and it's full of old people. It's great.
It is. No, there's a proper mix. I went down on Friday. I drove down and I brought my 10-year-old down to see Dermot Kennedy, and it was full of kids. There is a definite sense when you're down there, and anyone who's been down there and is of our age and goes, while it's bright, until the darkness descends, it is a brilliant place to bring the kids. Once the darkness descends, there's definitely a change, understandably a change in the tone.
People start
around the
pissing
place.
in public.
Well, exactly. So, yeah, we had a cracking day on Saturday. We were live in the Here Now tent with a live crappy quiz. I won't lie. I had a look in on Friday evening. It was very quiet in that sort of area of Electric Picnic. I thought, this might be a bit of a struggle tomorrow. And then I went down at about an hour and a half before our gig, and you couldn't move. I was like, wow, people are really up for this. It turned out Blind Boy was on just before us. Packed out the tent.
Yeah, which was interesting. Maybe you'd flip the order next time. That would be the one.
We should be the support act.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that would be more...
I think the hope was put him on and it'd start raining and nobody would leave.
But actually, we had our own crowd and everybody left after we were over, and then they obviously came back for people after us. But it was good. It was very good. Who won the crappy quiz? I can't remember.
It was even more shambolic than normal. We had either a...
Who won, Nathan?
We had either a Barry Keoghan lookalike or it was actually Barry Keoghan. I still can't figure out which, keeping score. And I think, Ger, he suggested that you won.
How could I have forgotten?
Well done.
It's 7:34 this morning. If you want to get in touch, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Or, of course, you can always leave a comment on the YouTube stream. We are very busy today, so we're going to get straight down to business. Performance rankings coming up in a second. Samuel Luckhurst, the Manchester Evening News Man United correspondent, at 8:10, sports pages and the GA roundup from Colin Mullaney. Harriet Prior is going to join us for the Liverpool post-mortem over the weekend. Quinlan's going to join us at 9:10. Maybe it's not a post-mortem after a 0-0 draw at the Derby, but it feels a little bit like the season's getting away from them. And then some Kenny Cunningham goodness, who was on commentary alongside Nathan for the big game yesterday. But it is 7:34. Let's bring you the Gillette Labs performance rankings.
That wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
So if you're brand new to this, it's very straightforward. We have a traffic light system. Somebody's in green, somebody's in amber, somebody's in red, and you can enter. You can play along at home. As I said, however you want to get involved, but ideally do it on a Sunday night on our Instagram page. So if you're not following us on Instagram, get over there, follow us on Instagram. You'll see the opportunity to put something in the box on Instagram. You can put it in the box in the comments as well at the moment and tell us who you think should be green, red and amber. Man United have lived in the red for months and months and months and months and months and months and months. Will they make the performance rankings today? I'm not sure, because I'm not doing them. You are, Nathan.
Well, you say that, Ger. Let's start then with the red at Arsenal. Just to be absolutely clear, I think Arsenal should be in the orange. I think they should be in the orange, but Ger has insisted that they are in the red because they lost one game. Apparently, you're not allowed to lose a single game in the Premier League this season.
Well,
started with 5 victories in a row, absolutely dominant after an hour, and end up losing. Does that say it's same old Arsenal? I don't think that means it's same old Arsenal.
Does it not mean exactly same old Arsenal, where they're very good in very important parts of the game, but not the one that really matters, which is actually winning matches? Is there not an inbuilt? I really wish Owen was here. Not the first and last time I'm going to say this, but just to be like, pick away at the scab of his self-doubt, which had like crusted over the last year, and was like, no, actually, maybe he couldn't bring himself to believe the good times were here. He couldn't. Jack made his debut sitting in that very chair last week, and he's like, look, there's still something flaky about this Arsenal. I can't put my finger on it. Well, Marcus Rashford put his finger on it. Christian Eriksen ripped off that scab, and it's the same old Arsenal underneath.
It's not the same old Arsenal
Why not?
underneath. Because the high point of this Arsenal is way ahead of where they've been in previous years. They were brilliant for the first 20 minutes of the
Scuttling around the potential qualification for the Champions League.
Absolutely. But what's the expectation? Should they be coming in this year to win the league? Like, are you thinking that this is an Arsenal squad ready to win a league title?
I think they should finish
all
best
the
of the rest, third. Like, they should. Is that not what they?
Well, I think there's every chance they finish best of the rest.
We're splitting hairs here, really. You think they're gonna compete to qualify for the Champions League? They should be like, oh, we're a Champions League team. Otherwise, they, like, in the last 2 years,
they haven't been a Champions League team since Arsene Wenger left.
No.
Like, they have quality throughout their squad that they haven't had for at least a decade at this stage. And yes, they were beaten yesterday, and maybe there was a bit of naivety in their defending at times. But they were at that moment in the game when Manchester United got their second goal. Arsenal were ripping them to shreds. They were growing in confidence. They were pushing for a second goal, and maybe they lost the run of themselves. Maybe there's a bit of inexperience when it comes to game management and how you build on the momentum that you have without losing the run of yourself. And maybe that is same old Arsenal, but I don't believe it. I don't think they're the finished article. I think in the middle of midfield, there's still something not quite there.
Well, they have injuries in the middle of midfield. That's why they were going after Douglas Luiz. Right, and some other players in the.
Well, they still have Granit Xhaka and Sambi Lokonga were in there yesterday, and they, as you said, have a couple of injuries. Maybe Zinchenko is there, but like they were the better team for large parts.
Story of Arsenal's life. The better
they have
team.
Been nowhere near the level they've got to so far this season.
Okay, but who have they beaten?
The last 4 or 5 years.
Who have they beaten so far this season?
But what? They lost one game. But who's anyone beaten? Like, they were top of the league. They won their first 5 games. That's all you can do. And they were brilliant. Like, they were by far and away the better team. Like, Manchester United couldn't get out of their own half for the first 20 minutes of the second half. I'm not saying United didn't deserve to win it with the way they got their goals and scored 2 brilliant counter-attacking goals. But the attempt to overreact to Arsenal losing one game, I just don't understand it.
Okay.
Listen, maybe for a lot of people, clearly there is 10 years of doubt.
Yeah,
and hurt
that's the problem.
That is there to think,
like, how do you
and now we
overcome
play
that?
Everton next week. Now Arsenal play Everton next week, and then they draw that game, and it slowly disintegrates. I'm not sure that's there with this Arsenal side.
There's a path to that happening all of a sudden in a way that you can see, not because of the fact that they lost the game, but because they lose a game that they're supposed to win. Like, they're supposed to win the game where they're dominant, where their attacking players are the best attacking players, but actually they're less efficient than the opposition. Like, the trouble here is that we've seen the movie before, right? You're right, though. They have better players now than they have had. Do they have a better manager? It's hard to know. Like, he may well be an excellent manager, but games like yesterday, you're supposed to be able to think your way through those and come out with something.
And maybe that's the next step in their evolution, is those big games when you are on top, getting the goals when it counts, whether it's just before half-time when De Gea is making a couple of brilliant saves from Martinelli. Maybe, that first goal should count at the VAR or returns, and it's a totally different thing. But
I don't think you can give the goal, can you?
Well, I thought the second I saw the replay was going to be disallowed. Kenny Cunningham on commentary yesterday was insistent that the goal had to stand, that this was a little bit of physical contact. I think I saw Aidan O'Hara from The Independent make a good point that, like, one of the things that's been said this year is that more physicality is allowed.
Yeah, it feels...
Except if there's a goal and we go back and we slow it right down. Like, if that happens and there's no goal, nobody ever thinks about it again. It's a little coming together. Like, Eriksen's slightly off balance. Maybe he needs to be stronger. Maybe that's, I think, what Kenny's argument is. That
yeah, there was a push,
it's not a...
That's the problem.
But it's a push because Eriksen has lost his balance because he's miscontrolled the ball. I thought the second I saw it, it's definitely going to be overruled. But I can understand Kenny's point of... And also, like we could talk for VAR for hours, as everybody has all weekend. Like,
Much worse.
Is it a clear and obvious error when the referee is staring at it from 5 yards away and in real time doesn't feel it's a free kick?
Yeah, no. I mean, in that instance, under those criteria, you have to give the goal. But once you've seen the foul, you can't say, I haven't seen the foul. That's the problem. Like, in a game like all of these games where the pace is the pace that these players are playing at because of their fitness and physicality and conditioning, you can probably give everything a foul one way or another.
When you look at back, as you said, I think that's yesterday's a prime example of that. It probably is a foul, but it's not given because at that moment the pace of the game was unbelievably intense and it was scrappy and there was players pushing into each other, knocking off each other constantly. So again, just because there's a goal scored at the end of it, you now have to go back and give a free kick where in real time as a referee you didn't believe there was one.
Yeah. In that instance, that should be the criteria. But look, not to get waylaid by the VAR, because everybody else has had this conversation already. You still think Arsenal are on an upward trajectory, which will see them in the Champions League qualifying places at the end of the season?
I think so.
That's what you're saying.
Now, the more you look at it,
Arsenal
a team is going to miss out. A team that will feel they should be there if you even just on Manchester City, Liverpool, Tottenham, Chelsea, Arsenal, and now Manchester United are very much in that mix. Like, two of these teams are going to miss out and have had a disastrous season if you don't finish inside the top four.
Yeah. I mean, 2 weeks ago we would have said it wouldn't be a disaster for Man United to finish outside the top four. We would have expected it, but then they spent $250 million in the last few days. And it's like, all right, well, that's a big injection of stuff. So this is our opportunity to talk about Man United. How impressed were you? Not that impressed, it sounds like.
I thought, again, there's a character there to Manchester United that doesn't panic. And at their best under Solskjaer, they were a brilliant counter-attacking team. And that's what they did yesterday. Like, they sucked Arsenal in. They were absorbing the pressure, albeit on the ropes a little bit in the second half, and struck. And they have that quality in midfield with Eriksen and Fernandes that they can pick out a pass at the right time. Like Marcus Rashford, it's a shame that he went off holding his hamstring. Finally looks like there's a bit of confidence coming back. Remember, just one goal. That Liverpool goal is only goal since January coming into this match. But he took the first one in particular really well. You didn't really have any doubts. I know it was the deflection and all that. You didn't have any doubts when he went through this time that he was actually going to score.
The deflection is very important, I think, in a way that that might be what he needed.
Quite possibly.
Like, it's possible.
Like, great striker score.
I did have a doubt. I actually did have a doubt. I thought that, like, this could be horrific here. But then, because it goes in off the deflection, his life changes. If he's back to what he was and fulfills his potential, I think that was a big sliding doors moment for him yesterday.
Yeah, I don't think United are the finished article yet. But you look at the two fullbacks, they look at his step up massively on where they were last season. Dalot looks full of confidence. He's playing in a, people talk about Zinchenko playing maybe in a Cancelo type, plays left back but pops up in the middle of midfield. Like, Dalot was everywhere yesterday. He's popping up on the edge of the D, like a transformative sort of fullback. Malacia was getting first 10 minutes. Saka had a couple of goals at him and looked to have the beating of him, but stuck at it and was solid. Again, defensively, I know even talking to Kenny again, he still has question marks about Martinez, but they didn't really do a huge amount wrong yesterday. And with Casemiro to come in, I
thought it was interesting Martinez kicked all around him, but that they got Gabriel Jesus early and often. Like, I mean, was it an accident that for 4 times in the first 20 minutes Jesus is on the ground, haven't been kicked? I'm not sure, but there's like a flintiness to that Harry Maguire wasn't doing that.
No, and Harry Maguire comes on and well, the first thing he does is just clatter a Manchester City an Arsenal player and get booked. And maybe what Martinez did was the right thing to do, because Gabriel Jesus was everywhere except as a number 9 for that game. Like, maybe mentally he thought, I don't want to be around this guy. I'm going to get injured if I stick near this guy for too long. But I think United, compared to where they were for the first couple of weeks of the season, it's obviously a world apart. Anthony comes in, gets his goal, looks to have a little bit of an edge about him. Like, there was a few little swipes at the Arsenal players, throwing the boot in, a little bit of chatting to some of the Arsenal players.
Why is Casemiro not playing? Is it just fitness?
Look, there's an awful lot of games coming. It's hard to believe it's fitness because he would have been starting for Real Madrid at the start of the season. Erik ten Hag obviously said he's learning to play my style.
Yeah.
And Scott McTominay is playing so well.
Yeah. I mean, but that's not incorrect either. Like, he is actually playing well.
No, and maybe he's slowly building them up, knowing that they have an insane run of fixtures coming up and doesn't want to risk them in any way. It will be interesting, a Casemiro Christian Eriksen, Bruno Fernandes midfield? And is that a midfield that can be got at pace-wise and intensity-wise, or actually are they going to have so much control of the ball that actually other teams won't be able to get near them in midfield?
And maybe Ten Hag is going to have multiple ways of playing in those games where they're not going to have control of the ball. You can play that, and it's a lot of through balls through, and the front three need to run, and they've got energy to do that now because, pardon me, Ronaldo's not in the team. Fergus Kyo says Arsenal are still top of the table in red. Come on, Ger. Look, you know it's early days. 6 games in. The table is not the table as it's going to be at the end of the season. You're not the only one. Ger wishes Owen was here, says MJW. I don't know whose shots that's for that particular. Maybe Arteta should be in the red. Why he changed the team at that moment, I'll never know, says Philip Nolan. Look, maybe this is all part of Arteta's learning curve, and he needs more time as a number one to be able to come through these things. So you're predicting they're going to finish top 4 still?
From what we've seen so far this season, I think from the quality that they have, I think Arsenal have given themselves a great chance of finishing top 4.
All right. Mikey Brown, how is VAR not in the red? You wanted VAR in the red. I took it out.
Basically, yeah, it was going to come up throughout the morning anyway.
Yeah,
so.
We have many opportunities for us. Right, so Arsenal should have been in the orange, says Nathan. I say they should have been in the red. You can have your own say in our comments box. 087 9180 180 is WhatsApp number. What's next?
Leicester. I don't need to come in any questions that Leicester should be in the red. Another defeat yesterday, beaten 5-2 by Brighton. Brighton unlucky not to be in the green. Bottom of the table, 1 point from 6 games. And a general sense with Brendan Rodgers that he's given up. He's just waiting for the inevitable payoff that will come. It's a real shame because what Leicester have done over the last few years under Rodgers has been outstanding. Yeah, they screwed up. They didn't get that Champions League spot twice when it was there for the taking. And it's falling apart as a club. Like they sustained, okay, not quite winning the title again, but sustained being a regular top half of the table team. And there's no reason why they can't get back there. But there was such an opportunity for them over the last 18 years to really make themselves a force where they're a top 6 team every single year. Thought they were unbelievably unlucky last season with the amount of injuries that they picked up throughout the season. Totally derailed them. And this summer, they haven't done the business. They, had become something of a selling club, even if they've managed to keep hold of, James Maddison and Jamie Vardy and Harvey Barnes. The Wesley Fofana situation just dragged on for far too long. Yeah, they got full value in the end, but did it give them enough time to get replacements in? Did it give them a chance to spend their 80 million quid? I don't know. And it feels the most inevitable thing. We are just waiting for the message to come through this afternoon that Brendan Rodgers is gone.
You think it'll be that they won't give us all the drama that we feel we deserve in football? Give them a week. I mean, it's a full week is the problem, right? Leicester, Aston Villa next Saturday afternoon at 3:00. Brendan Rodgers versus Steven Gerrard. It's well, we don't deserve this.
What about this scenario? All right, where Brendan Rodgers is gone this week. Then Leicester go and beat Aston Villa. Steven Gerrard is fired next week, and Brendan Rodgers is the new Aston Villa manager.
Equally a scenario that could play out.
Would you, as a Villa fan, would you be comfortable with Brendan Rodgers being the next Aston Villa manager?
I think Brendan Rodgers is an excellent football manager. Yeah, like people dislike Brendan Rodgers for whatever reason. I think was that what Mark Lawrence said, for whatever reason. Never really had much time for him for whatever reason. In the parlance of football, he's chocolate in that he would eat himself, but you don't.
Oh, there's a huge amount of revisionism when it comes to Brendan Rodgers' achievements of everywhere he's been, and at Liverpool, what he should have done differently that day against Chelsea and the naivety and all of that. Like, he got Liverpool playing incredible football, some of the best football they've played, certainly in the intervening years before Jurgen Klopp came along. Obviously, Celtic supporters look at him very differently despite all the success that they brought there because he jumped ship. And again, at Leicester, if you take away the title-winning season and maybe the freakish aspect of that, he's done more than anybody has done. Gets them 5th in the league twice. Even last season, where it was a struggle, they ended up finishing 8th, which for a club of Leicester is exceptional. And also, if you're a club like Aston Villa, he has a track record of making really good signings.
I do wonder how much credit you need to give him for that, or the architecture that comes with him, and it seems like Leicester have been very good at signing before and after. Well, obviously we haven't seen the after yet.
Brought in likes of Coutinho, Firmino at Liverpool as well. But he's also developed young players. He has a track record at Leicester of developing young players, even at Liverpool with Raheem Sterling. So, James Justin, Harvey Elliott, Harvey Barnes, James Maddison, all of these guys have got a lot better. Keenan Dewsbury Hall over the last 18 months under Brendan Rodgers. And it's falling apart, and he seems quite happy almost for it to fall apart at this stage. But I still think while him getting the top 6 job is gone for now, those middle-ranking teams like Villa Ger will snap him up.
Well, I mean, you say that like it's supposed to be an insult, but Villa need to know exactly where they are in the world at the moment, and they're not in the world where you can take some manager who has not got very much experience and put him into the Premier League and let him learn on the job. However, they have just had their best result of the season by slowing down the Manchester City juggernaut under intense pressure and coming from behind to do it and nearly snatching a winner. So, I don't know if Steven Gerrard has won. He certainly has not won the Villa fans back just yet. But, beat Leicester next week, and all of a sudden, the mood music, the pressure valve is released, and he's going to be the manager through the next transfer window. If they that's what these games mean. That's what, if they'd been beaten like Nottingham Forest had been by Manchester City, and there'd been another Haaland hat-trick, I think he would have been in the red. They would have been in so much trouble. And now they have a relatively easy game, you would say, next week if Brendan Rodgers is still the manager. So, I don't know, it's very interesting.
Well, they were really unlucky at the weekend, the decision around the disallowed goal and the raising of the flag early goes against everything we've seen from officials over the last 18 months. Yeah, as long as you don't get beaten 6-7-0 by Manchester City, you're probably not getting fired off the back of that. But it is, as you say now, an expectation going into the Leicester game because they are in absolute crisis, that these are the sort of games Villa need to win and to build a bit of momentum. Gerrard can turn it around, managers turn it around all the time. Just listening to the commentary around Villa on this show and elsewhere over the last couple of weeks, it does feel that there's just a general lack of trust of Gerrard, that it won't take much for Villa to go back into crisis mode again.
No. That's one side. The other side of it is that actually he's started to. So Douglas Luiz hadn't been in the team for whatever reason. I don't know if they had if that was one of those. He wants to leave. Well, you can't pick him if he wants to leave. We might sell him. Don't put him. But he started. He obviously had been their only goal scoring threat from corners for a couple of weeks there. But he started the game with Kamara and Ramsey and McGinn, and I don't know, it seems to have worked. Leon Bailey, who obviously didn't play any football last season after his big money arrival, he was given out about not being in the team, but has started to score goals, scored in the cup, scored at the weekend. You're like, well, maybe there is the bones of a good team there, and maybe those players can go on a run. And the team is completely settled now because of the injuries that they've had. So, I don't know. Does a result like that against Man City give everybody a bit of confidence and everybody's bouncing in a train and going, actually, you know what, we just stopped the greatest team that might ever exist?
It'd want to give you a bit of confidence.
It would. I mean, Haaland and De Bruyne, Foden and Silva started that game. That's a good team. It's a good team, and they held them. So that the next week is going to be interesting. You can't see a way out for Brendan Rodgers at Leicester unless Leicester decides, well, you got us into this mess, get us out of it.
Suck it up. Yeah, it doesn't, much like the Scott Parker scenario where he was got rid of just because of his general negativity, that for Leicester, if Rodgers doesn't want to be there, he always seems like a very naturally enthusiastic and positive person. He looks quite broken right now, so maybe the best thing for Leicester. The last time they were bottom of the league and it was all doom and gloom, they suddenly turned it all around and within 18 months were champions, so who knows. Bring back Nigel Pearson.
They did have a very good squad of players.
I think they've still got a pretty good squad of players there at the moment, and
they all kind of seem like they all want out.
Well, that is the problem. Almost every single one of them has been linked with somebody else.
I actually do think that I think we talked about this at the time, that the constant Rodgers being linked with and never quite denying the Man United links and whoever else was coming up links. If you're Tielemans or Vardy or any of the rest of those players and you're looking at that going, okay, so this is a stepping stone. That's we're all agreed. We're going to do our very best while it's here, but it's a stepping stone, right?
Well, if you look at that team from yesterday, Justin, Ndidi, Barnes, Tielemans, Maddison, all of them linked with moves during the summer. And again, all of them knowing that if Antonio Conte implodes at Christmas, that Brendan Rodgers will be gone like that.
Yeah.
So
it's the wages of sin. 7:55, let's go to Amber.
Amber, we've decided to put the Republic of Ireland's women's national team in amber. Obviously, it's an easy green after the success of Thursday night, but tomorrow night has taken on all sorts of importance now against Slovakia because there's a real opportunity for Ireland to be one of the seeded sides for the playoff draw. That's it. Play my music, Ger. I'm going to explain how the playoffs work. I think everyone has a basic understanding of the initial playoff system right now. So 9 teams qualify for the playoffs. The bottom 6 teams, according to their points, will play off in the first round. The top 3 get a bye from the first round and go straight through to the second round. So on Thursday night after the game, I sort of gone through it and felt it wasn't that unlikely. I know Vera Pauw at the time felt, a lot of things need to happen, but all of them weren't beyond the realms of possibility. In fact, some of them were quite obvious. So for Ireland to finish in the top 3, the following needed to happen. They needed Norway to beat Belgium. Norway beat Belgium by 1-0. They needed England to beat Austria. England beat Austria by 2-0. They needed Serbia to drop points in one of their last 2 games against either Portugal or Israel. Portugal beat Serbia, which means it is now in Ireland's own hands. If they can win in Slovakia tomorrow evening, 5 o'clock kickoff, Ireland will be one of the 3 seeded teams. They'll be the 3rd seeded team. So Switzerland and either Iceland or the Netherlands are going to be the top 2 seeded teams. Belgium are currently 3rd, but they are finished. So Ireland are on 14 points, Belgium are on 16 points, a win for Ireland, and they will be one of the seeded teams, which means they get a bye, and it also means they definitely avoid Switzerland, Netherlands, Iceland, the toughest possible teams in that draw for the playoffs. Now, being the 3rd seeded team does increase the possibility that you're in that pretty nightmarish scenario where you can win your final playoff and still not qualify.
What?
So there'll be 3 playoff winners. At the end of all this, there'll be 3 European playoff winners. Only the top 2 qualify for the World Cup.
Automatically.
The 3rd team will go to a repechage, you could call it, in New Zealand next February, where there'll be 10 teams from around the world, an Interconfederations playoff. 10 teams, 3 more places for the World Cup, divided into 3 sections.
But we would definitely be the top-ranked team in that by a mile, right?
Definitely one of the strong favourites. Again, there's so much still to go in different parts of the world. It's kind of hard to figure out how that would work out and what teams you would end up being drawn against.
Yeah.
So the ideal scenario for Ireland is obviously they win their playoff and then there's an upset somewhere else. The way they're going to do it, and it doesn't seem to make a huge amount of sense, is they'll take your points from the group stage and then add the result from the final. And I'm assuming that means if one of them was a draw and it went to penalties, that would actually count as 1 point rather than a 3-point win. So by winning directly, you could possibly get through.
So just to play that out, are you actually better being a strong team and having the 2 games, so from your semi-final, or do they only take the points from the final?
Only from the final.
Okay,
Again,
fair enough.
It doesn't... I definitely think seeding is the way to go so that you avoid... So Netherlands and Iceland play tomorrow as well, and the Dutch need to win that. Now, they'd be strong favourites to win that. But I think you want to avoid Iceland, Netherlands, Switzerland. There's a possibility you get Bosnia, who'd be seen as one of the weaker runner-up, and if Ireland are seeded. So it just makes it more straightforward. But there is a possibility, Ireland could have, if they weren't to win tomorrow night, could have 4 more games to qualify, and all 4 tough games. So that's the only reason they're in the amber. I think after Thursday night, everyone's feeling confident. But Slovakia have been a pain in the ass for everybody in this group so far. They obviously drew in Dublin. They took points off Finland as well. And Ireland need to get themselves back up after the celebrations. It was such a high on Thursday night that, back down to earth, big job to do. And life could be a whole lot easier.
Injured.
Jamie Finn suspended.
Yeah, so they're not as strong as they were in advance of the game last week, but we'll have more on that in a little while. We have Aisling O'Reilly, our reporter, is on the trip with them and reporting back over the next 24, 48 hours. Hopefully it's a historic victory and we catapult ourselves forward straight into that playoff and we get a reasonable draw and away we go. So even if we have to win the playoff, otherwise there's no...
you got to win from once tomorrow night is done. So Ireland are in a playoff regardless, even if Slovakia were to beat them tomorrow night. But from there on in, you got to win every game or you're gone.
Okay. All right. So that's why they're in the amber. We hope that they'll be in the green by this time next week. So who are in the green, Nathan?
I think we start with Celtic in the green. Old Firm win by 4-0. Celtic's season so far, played 6 games, won all 6 games, scored 25 goals, conceded 1 goal, and they've just beaten Rangers by 4 goals. If ever there was a week that Celtic should be in the green, it's this week. And Real Madrid are coming to town tomorrow.
Could be the greatest week of all time.
Quite possibly. I know Celtic fans are absolutely loving what they're seeing from Celtic right now. Not just the form that they're showing, the manner of their performances, the quality of their performances, the style of football where they're totally dominating teams, where it's real slick passing possession football, scoring top quality goals, and a sense that actually going into Europe and being in the Champions League group stage for the first time since 2017, that maybe they can make an impression. It's the one little question mark that's hanging over Ange Postecoglou. Is last season was a huge disappointment. They get well beaten by Bodo Glimt in the Conference League after dropping out of the Europa League. That greatness at Celtic, even still, is achieved by making an impression in Europe. Nobody's expecting them even to go back, I think, to the days really of what Martin O'Neill was doing, such as the disparity in European football, but that they can go out against quality teams and show their best stuff. So Real Madrid tomorrow night is tough a test as you can get, the defending champions. They've got Leipzig and Shakhtar Donetsk in the group as well. They're in a position already where maybe while the games are coming thick and fast, that they're pretty much guaranteed to win the vast majority of their games in the Scottish Premiership, that they can be fresh and rested. And whatever they might say about Brendan Rodgers, they look at Ange Postecoglou in a very, very different way.
Yeah, they do. I mean,
they'd all the GA legends over there at the weekend.
Yeah, what was the
David
story
Clifford
with that?
was there.
Yeah, Kevin Cassidy.
Cassidy.
They were in the same group and they were all on the pitch.
I saw Mark O'Shea
meeting. Oh, was he in the same group? All right. I wonder what the crack was, what the link was. Kevin Cassidy was saying he was pretty certain that Clifford could play up front for us, and by us he was meaning Celtic. I do wonder if there's like a
transfer.
A smart marketing person who like gets him to a club for a week of a trial in the style of Anthony Towell. Remember that? That was yeah.
Went to Manchester United, didn't he?
He did, yeah. Scored in a reserve game.
Right.
He definitely would be. There's a couple of the Kerry lads there as well.
Yeah, so they absolutely ripped Rangers to pieces. I say the quality of the goals. The fourth goal, like Rangers were just broken. The keeper just passes it straight out to the Celtic attacker, who just slots it in. And again, it's what Celtic have to be now, picking up players from different parts of the world. They brought Aaron Moy back from China. He was at Brighton. He was a okay Premier League player and looks top quality now for Celtic. Matt O'Reilly was brilliant at the weekend, and Kyogo, Abada, Jota are all scoring a load of goals. So there's a lot to like about Celtic, and you hope that tomorrow night against Real Madrid they can do themselves justice.
Yeah, I mean, I presume every Premier League team is looking at Ange going, what do we need to do to get him, or how much more does he have to do before the rest of the Premier League teams are like, okay, we need to get this guy.
Well, I think it's the manner of the football as well. Like we're seeing, like Brighton, as I say, could easily have been in the green this week. Teams want attacking possession football. It's what supporters want to see. They don't want to see their team sitting back, regardless of where they are on the table now. They want to see they're having a go and they're going to be entertained. And if the odd time you get it beaten because of that, fine. But they don't want the 1-0, we're sitting 5 back. And I think Ange Postecoglou will be really attractive to a huge amount of Premier League clubs because of that. He gets his teams playing, and he's shown he can mix and match players. Like, they don't have too many superstars at Celtic, really, at the moment. But he's getting them to this level. So I can't see him pulling a Brendan Rodgers and jumping ship mid-season. But who knows how this Premier League season develops. Maybe Brendan Rodgers gets fired and Leicester say, you know what, we've got good connections up in Celtic. Let's go again.
Yeah. All right.
The headline.
There you go. 4 minutes past 8. Who else is in the green?
Final one in the green. Got to be Ger McGeehan. Unbelievable on Friday night. Diamond League winner in Brussels, and broke Sonia O'Sullivan's 1,500 metre record, which has stood since all the way back in 1995. Ger McGeehan had never broken 4 minutes before, and she finished in 3 minutes 56 seconds, 0.63. So took over 2 seconds off Sonia O'Sullivan's Irish record. And this has been coming. Ger McGeehan, interesting listening to her over the weekend. She's obviously performed exceptionally at the Commonwealth Games and at the European Championships, having chosen to skip the World Championships in Oregon, taking silver medals behind Laura Muir. And they weren't particularly fast races, but she said she knew this sort of sub 4 minute time was in her, and she was just praying to God that she would get a fast 1500 metres so she could show it. She wasn't even in the race towards the end of last week, again, because her times this year hadn't been exceptional. Her performances have been brilliant, but those races where she performed have been some of the slower races, even though they were big championship races. And she managed to get a place in late on and beats Laura Muir, who she trains with all the time. And you look at the results across the European Championship, across this Diamond League, she is competing and beating people who are World Championship medalists, who are top 3, top 4 in the world on a consistent basis. And she has got to be looking towards another World Championship next year in Budapest, with a real possibility of being in the mix for a medal. And it's going to be in action again this week. The Diamond League final is on on Thursday night. So that's on in Zurich. So, yeah, I think Ciara McGeehan, as one of the most, understandably, one of the most popular Irish sports people, has been building towards this throughout her entire career. She's 30 now, and, people might have felt, well, actually, maybe those days of contending for medals or running these sort of times weren't going to happen. But if anything, she's just getting better and better.
Yeah, as an 18-year-old, she won a silver medal in the World Junior Championships in 2010, and so that's like, she was a world quality athlete at 18, and here she is finally fulfilling her potential after injury and all sorts of things had prevented her from getting to that point. So really, to beat your training partner who's beaten you twice for medals at the end of the season. I don't know if you've seen the same commentary I have, but the British commentators are like, oh, our girl, well, she must be very tired at the end of the season. And then you look at the time, like, no, she just couldn't run as fast. No.
Well, I think you saw the reaction from...
the other thing was, I was kind of surprised they didn't try and claim her. That was the other thing that was about to happen.
That's coming. That'll be next year when she gets that World Championship medal.
I think.
But she's always been one for the big day. Like, her previous record in 1500 was in a World Championship. So I think we all know, when we look at Ciara McGeehan, we can trust that she is going to perform on the big stage. And it'd be interesting. I'm sure she doesn't have any regrets about skipping the World Championship, because maybe skipping that and focusing a little bit later in the summer has allowed her to perform at the Commonwealths and at the Europeans and get this new record because of that. But looking ahead to the next World Championship, like, she has got to be thinking there's a definite medal chance.
Yeah, and also, like, there's a very limited window for athletes to make money in these big competitions. So fingers crossed she can, that, and I think that would also justify everything as well, because we forget that these athletes represent Ireland on an absolute shoestring in terms of the revenue that we give them as a country to run in our colours. So,
well, I thought the conversation with Eamon Coughlin last week was fascinating, and Ciara McGeehan left Ireland. She went over to Manchester. She's spoken about how difficult a decision that was. But she's training with the best, so she's training with Laura Muir, so she knows exactly every single day what she's got to do to get herself into contention. And it's worked in her favour, and it's been brilliant to see, and it'll be hopefully brilliant to see on Thursday night as well.
All right, some comments coming in. Owen Hurley says, put Klopp in the red, Liverpool on cruise control in the second half, and he brings on Milner. Why? Was he going to unlock Everton's defence? Like, I'd get it if we went 1-0 up, but come on, Jesus. What did you make of the... we're going to talk about this in a few minutes with Harriet Prior. What did you make of Liverpool's performance?
Again, that line of there's something just missing. I think midfield isn't there. The energy that has been a hallmark of this team over the last 4 or 5 years isn't there in midfield, and I think that is destabilising everything. I keep going back to the goal that Palace scored against them, and Eze getting around Fabinho in midfield. That tackle is made by a Liverpool player every time for the last 3 or 4 years. Like, Henderson gets in and he wins that ball, and then actually Liverpool are on the attack. Suddenly probably Trent's release or Salah's release, because it's all a little bit uncertain. But he loses it, and the defence are just exposed. And again, Everton had several chances on the counter-attack, and Van Dijk looks a little bit off it. Trent, defensively, there's question marks. But they haven't had to defend like this at any stage since they got to the club, because the midfield isn't protecting them. Like, Liverpool's midfield was everything. They're not the stars. They were the engine.
Yeah.
But it was an engine that overpowered everything.
Is there a possibility that they're the ones struggling to finish fourth?
If it continues to go like this, we've obviously seen a couple of years ago where it disintegrated pretty quickly. Now, they've had players coming back, and they did win their previous game 9-0. and they hit the woodwork, 3-4 times?
Well, the previous game was
weekend?
the late winner against Newcastle.
Oh, sorry, Newcastle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was like a 97-minute winner. You know, which is great and everything. It's great that that's happening, but you can't bank on that all the time. And
No, you can't. And there is the possibility that the other teams have improved massively and Liverpool have fallen back. They need to find something in midfield. Like the fact that Henderson's going to be out for, it seems, at least till the international break would leave you very concerned. They're picking up a lot of injuries. I think the reason Milner came on, we were down at Electric Picnic, so I only saw the highlights afterwards. I thought it was that Trent had gone off injured as well.
Okay.
Just before the hour mark. But again, like, you're relying on James Milner.
Patrick Campbell is on my camp here. He says, bit late to the party here, lads, but Arsenal are royally affected in October when they play the top half of the table teams and 3 Europa League games midweek. Let's wait and see.
But everybody is that.
He's marrying them. I'm like, no, okay, one weekend, fine, let's have the crack.
I actually think that brings in, even for Liverpool, for Manchester City, that's the jeopardy that
Brings
the next
them back
month.
to the pack.
Well, for everybody, like everybody has 10 games in the next month.
They all have giant bloated squads, whereas
I don't know if like City obviously have the quality. Do they have a giant bloated squad? They always have 3 or 4 academy kids. Like, they're the best academy kids, so
They're all
be
kids
just fine.
Like the opposition are trying to buy for it. Well, Chelsea might be. I don't know what's going on at Chelsea. There's a case study there which we'll do later on in the week. It's 11 minutes past 8. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. That is this week's Gillette Labs performance rankings.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
So the Premier League is back. We've teamed up with one of Europe's largest sports events ticketing and hospitality companies, Champions Travel, to give you the opportunity to win a €250 Champions Travel voucher each day this week. They can be used on Premier League matches as well as a host of other sporting events. Daily winners will also be entered into a grand prize draw where one lucky winner will win a trip from a selection of Premier League games with flights and 2 nights accommodation included. To enter, just tell us who this is complaining about VAR over the weekend.
It's not good enough. It's not good enough.
You can tweet us your guess on our main Twitter account, which is @OffTheBall. We're back after the break with Samuel Luckhurst. First, OTB's Aisling O'Reilly is in Slovakia ahead of the Republic of Ireland's match tomorrow evening. She got up with the Slovak Shamrocks GA team.
And so how does the club here work? How many times a week would you train?
Mostly once a week, sometimes twice a week, especially when we get into tournament season. But yeah, usually on Sunday afternoon.
Brilliant. And tournament season, so what's that like? Do you actually have teams that you play against then?
Yeah, so there's a pretty big, all over Europe, there's a lot of different teams, Vienna, Budapest, like all sorts of different teams. So a couple of weeks ago, we travelled to Seyring and we played against the Vienna team. And yeah, we do that every now and then, so it's pretty fun.
And how did you get on over there?
We did pretty okay. I think that the men's might have done better than the women's team, but we still had a lot of fun.
And you could be a part of so many different clubs, so many different sports. Why do you choose to be involved here with the GA?
Oh yeah, well, so I used to be a part of my school's football and basketball team, but they all stopped because of COVID. And so I needed to play a sport, not just because I wanted to, but also I need to do it to pass my high school, to get my high school diploma, because we had to do activity as part of it. And so then I was like, yeah, I'll come down here with my brother, and he suggested it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry, so what's that about then? You actually have to do some sort of physical activity in order to pass high school?
Yeah, so I'm doing the IB diploma, and part of that is you have to do something called CAS, which stands for Creativity, Activity and Service. So I play the piano for my creativity, for activity it's Gaelic football, and then for service I work at my school library. So
brilliant. So Gaelic football actually is included, it qualifies?
Yeah, it does.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Off the ball.
Anthony, and Anthony. That will be the front three for Manchester United. Martial, Alanga and Anthony. I've laughed my socks off if that actually happened.
There was this left back down at West Ham and I'd done him once, and I went back and I'd done him again. And then I'd done him a third time and I thought, yeah, I'm going to have a go again. Flicked the ball around and nutmegged him and got by him. Anyway, he took me out about waist height, right? And I was down and I got up again. I turned to the referee and the referee said, you deserve that, mate.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts and download the OTB Sports app.
Things that put people off on a first date. Showing up late and getting your name wrong. Always a great start. Looking at their phone more than you? Hello? Someone who only talks about themselves. Oh, really? God, aren't you great? Look, no one said dating is perfect, but at GoDating.ie, we promise we'll always try and find your perfect match. Because somewhere out there, there's someone for you. And GoDating.ie will help you find them. Yes, even you, socks and sandals guy. Go on, go for it with GoDating.ie.
If your business relies on a van, that wouldn't sound good. But this does. Get up to 75% off van insurance. Now available in FBD branches nationwide. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. 75% no claims discount based on 5 years claims free. Available on new van policies used for farm or business purposes. Terms and conditions apply. Underwritten by FBD Insurance plc. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
All right, it's 15 minutes past 8. It's time for us to turn our attention to the situation at Manchester United, where, one swallow doesn't make a summer, but 3 of them in a row certainly makes people think, we can feel a bit of sun on our backs. I'm delighted to say Samuel Luckhurst is with us again. Sam, good morning to you. How are you doing?
Good morning. Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on, as always.
The mood music has definitely changed. What about the quality of performances? We can get into the overarching struggles that the club have had and whether or not a tide has been turned. Have the performances still got room to grow as well? So is this the beginning of the process, I suppose I'm asking?
Undeniably, Ten Hag's been quite consistent about that, and he said it again yesterday that there's room for improvement individually and collectively. I think United is still not playing the way he would prefer them to play. Their preferred tactic still seems to be the counter-attack you saw with pretty much all the goals against Arsenal yesterday, which has a bit of the Solskjaer about it, certainly pre-autumn of last year when it was effective. And Ten Hag doesn't want them to play that way. He wants to be more progressive, possession-based. They're still yet to master that, but after the 2 debacles against Brentford and Brighton, it was all about getting points on the board, and fair play to him and the players and what he's done since then. They've taken 12 out of 12. So now the transfer window's closed and he's integrating new signings into the team, and they have stabilised for a couple of weeks there now. He'll probably try and implement his style more now that the competitive games have started and the window is closed, crucially.
Being a counter-attacking team may not be exactly what Eric Ten Hag wants his side to be, but it does feel like maybe it's exactly what they need right now when we talk about the mood music around the club. Like, you think back to that first day against Brighton, the second a couple of misplaced passes started, the crowd were getting on their back, whereas yesterday, even when Arsenal were in the ascendancy, you felt that United supporters weren't panicking because there was that belief, actually, we can get them. All we need is the ball to fall to Eriksen or Fernandes at the right time, and we can get them on the counter-attack. That there's an excitement to that style of play that maybe suits United where they are right now. Maybe it doesn't bring them a title long term, but for the progression over the next 6 months, being that exciting counter-attacking team is just what they need.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one of the key aspects of that is the signing of Christian Eriksen, and that they've got a player from deep who can break the lines with his passing. Previously, it was only Fernandes, and of course, Fernandes plays high up the pitch, close to the striker. He was very good as well yesterday. Both those players were involved in all 3 goals. But Eriksen is effectively playing this Frenkie de Jong role without United signing Frenkie de Jong, and they didn't have to pay a fee for him. So far, that deal is working out very well. The more you watch Eriksen, the more you understand why the previous 3 permanent United managers actually called him up and tried to sign him. So, as I said earlier, although Ten Hag wants them to play a more progressive, controlling form of football, I think they had something like 39% of the ball yesterday against Arsenal. And although the crowd, as you say, were extremely supportive, and the mood is completely different from a couple of weeks ago when they had the protests before the Liverpool game, and that those chants about the Glazers are continuing. There were a few occasions yesterday where the crowd was getting audibly exasperated with Rashford for not being at full throttle while he was playing up front. But one of the things that have really impressed about Ten Hag is how proactive a manager he is, in that he brought Ronaldo on quite early yesterday, having brought Casemiro on quite early in the second half against Leicester. And both those substitutions had a big impact. And Rashford, I don't think it's a coincidence that his 3 goals this season have come when he has moved to the left wing, and he can run into areas where the space is vacated, in the case yesterday by Ronaldo, where he drops off the Rashford can play on the shoulder of the last defender. And that high line from Arsenal just didn't work yesterday, and United were able to score a couple of goals that way.
It's interesting that the Rashford form has this kind of knock-on impact on everything else, because all of a sudden you don't have to play anybody else in any of the forward positions. If he's playing well, he's an option for you across the line, and then as a result of that, there's competition. So Jadon Sancho is not going to play 90 minutes if he's not playing well in the game. However, his standard will rise because of the competition that he feels, because if he's not playing well, he's going to be substituted. So it's kind of this virtuous circle that but it only works if Rashford's scoring goals. So we were having this conversation a little bit earlier on about like sliding doors moments. He's clean through, the deflection happens, and it takes the ball past the goalkeeper. Ball nestles in the bottom of the net. If he misses that opportunity, the exasperation of the crowd maybe rings in his ears a bit more. But all of a sudden, you know, those 1-2 chances that he scored in the last couple of weeks, that could be transformative to his career.
It certainly could, and when you would look at the attack now with Anthony in there, you would struggle to say that Rashford is a certain starter, because although he is starting through the middle, the feeling among United fans, certainly those of us who watch them quite regularly, is that there's no real debate over where his best position is. It is on the left-hand side. He's played his best football for United there. He's played most of his football for United there. Gareth Southgate seems to feel, certainly when Rashford was in the England squad, that that's where you can maximise him the best. Now, Ten Hag is obviously playing through the middle for now, but there were some supporters who were surprised yesterday that Rashford still started, given that Ronaldo looked a bit sharper on the ball when he came on against Leicester. You can't just discount Ronaldo either, because of the impact he had when he came on, and Rashford was obviously able to move to the left. But despite all that chatter about Paris Saint-Germain, he does seem refreshed playing under Ten Hag, a coach who obviously has a good track record of improving not just any players that he inherits on an individual basis, but the attackers he inherits. So although there's pressure on Rashford in that you would possibly look at that attack and think when everyone's fit, it's going to be Anthony, Martial, given how propitious his pre-season was, and Sancho. He's got 3 goals so far, and he's certainly got a hell of a lot of incentives to sustain this form in the run-up to the selection for the World Cup. England have got one more squad to get together this month. So far, you'd probably say that Rashford will get back in on the strength of his start to the season.
Talk to us a little bit about the improvement in the performance of players who had previously not been playing particularly well. So McTominay had become a bit of a punchline. It's interesting to see him holding off Casemiro for now from the team, but actually playing very well. We've obviously seen the right back suddenly not be a problem, but maybe actually something where we are talking about somebody who could have a long-term future in the team. That's 2. We've talked about Rashford. What's happening there with those players that is making them good, or at least competent?
Well, McTominay always seems to get a bounce from a new manager. It took a while under Solskjaer, but when he did finally start, he pretty much stayed in the team. And at the start of Solskjaer's first full season, he was probably just as key to United as Rashford was. Rashford was getting most of the goals in those first few months, but McTominay was the glue in that midfield, and when he did get injured, they missed him. Rangnick took a shine to him, and now Ten Hag keeps on playing him ahead of Casemiro. I mean, that was a bit of a shock yesterday, that Casemiro, who had been at the club for a fortnight, was still on the bench, whereas Anthony, who was officially a United player for a matter of days, was thrown straight into the team. But McTominay, I think he's got the right mentality. He understands the pace of the Premier League, the aggressive nature of it, and he is the kind of midfielder who you could always see relishing those games against Arsenal. He certainly relished playing against them in the past. Whether that informed Ten Hag's thinking, it'd be interesting to know. But you can rely on McTominay to be quite disciplined, to win the ball, to keep up with the tempo, really. And that's going to be interesting when Casemiro does get in the team, how he fares in a very intense game from start to finish, potentially. With Dalot, again, he gained the trust of Rangnick quite quickly. He did okay under Rangnick. I wouldn't say he was particularly, one of the... There are a handful of players that enjoyed their time playing under him and performed. But compared with Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who was a player Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was trying to replace last year with Kieran Trippier, it's like night and day, and Dalot does look an even more confident player under Ten Hag. That back four is unrecognisable now from the back four Solskjaer settled on, where it was an Anglo-Scandi back four, if you like, where you had Wan-Bissaka, Maguire, Lindelof and Shaw. it now consists of a completely overseas back line there. Maguire obviously came on yesterday and got booked pretty much straight away. So unless there's an injury to any of those 4 starting defenders at the moment, it's difficult to see Maguire, Wan-Bissaka or Luke Shaw getting in, which again is interesting given the knock-on effect it'd have on England. So although it's still early days with Ten Hag, it was quite apparent during pre-season that he does have this propensity for improving individuals, and individuals do gain his trust and do buy into his methods very quickly.
Just on Casemiro, it is still very early days, but obviously his signing came at the end of a long, arduous summer of trying to get Frankie de Jong, trying to get Adrien Rabiot. Like, the fact that he doesn't start a big game like that yesterday, would there be any sense that he's not Ten Hag's man, that in the biggest games, maybe Ten Hag will worry about having a midfield of Casemiro, Fernandes and Eriksen and their mobility against like an Arsenal, say those 3 behind Jesus, and even Jesus who dropped deep, you know, the constant rotations, that maybe actually there'll always be a place for a McTominay or a Fred?
It's an interesting point, and I suppose longer it carries on with Casemiro not starting a league game. I think he will start against Real Sociedad, but they weren't signing him to start in Europa League group games necessarily. It was mainly the bread and butter of the Premier League. And of course, De Jong was the one that Ten Hag really wanted, and people at United have held their hands up. They said there was never any chance they were going to sign De Jong and Casemiro. Effectively, the fee they agreed with Barcelona for Frankie De Jong was eventually invested on Casemiro. They would certainly have been open to signing Adrien Rabiot and one of Frankie De Jong and Casemiro. Casemiro and Frankie de Jong, I don't need to go on to both of you about how markedly different those 2 midfielders are. But you clearly saw after the Brentford debacle and after the statement that came out from Sir Jim Ratcliffe's spokesperson, that there was a complete shift in the spending from Manchester United in the summer. They went from scrummaging around in the bargain basket looking for Marco Arnautovic and Adrien Rabiot to invest in something like 160 million pounds in Casemiro and Antony. Antony was very much a priority signing, was very much signing that Ten Hag wanted. With Casemiro, there were discussions for a lot longer than appeared to be the case. I mean, that interest emerged quite late in the day, and it seemed to be done quite quickly thereafter, but United did touch base earlier in the window. It's interesting that he was clearly seen as a backup target to De Jong in that, as I said earlier, they are very, very different players. Casemiro is definitely what United need more than De Jong, in that they just did not have a defensive midfielder in their squad before they signed him, and a defensive midfielder is non-negotiable in the Premier League. You look at every elite club or every very well-run club in the Premier League with a good squad, and they've all got a defensive midfielder. So belatedly, United cottoned on, and maybe Ten Hag was delusional up until a point, and that point might specifically have been the Brentford thrashing where Christian Eriksen was the deepest midfielder. So it will be interesting to see how long McTominay stays in the team, because he has done okay in the last couple of games prior to the Arsenal game, which was by far and away his best performance of the season. But after one game this season, in the Brighton defeat, he was dropped at Brentford. So, ironically, by being dropped for that Brentford game, that's probably done no harm whatsoever.
Yeah.
You also need the McTominays of this world, don't you? As you're building a squad over the next few years.
Well,
like Manchester United's success was built on the Wes Browns, Darren Fletchers, John O'Shea's, who could come in and always give you a 7, 8 out of 10 performance.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's this idealistic view, certainly from a faction of the fan base online, that your squad must only consist of world-class players or top-draw players, and that only applies at a handful of clubs, maybe Manchester City, maybe Liverpool, certainly in the Premier League. But there are players who, I mean, historically at United, as you just said there, that has always been a great help to them, in that they've got players who can come in, who are versatile, who are maybe a level above squad filler, but they're always going to be on the bench, and whatever the occasion, you're going to get a shift from them. And McTominay has overachieved in just really playing for the United first team. He was never somebody at academy level who struck anyone as being a certainty or really having much of a chance of getting in. But of course, Mourinho took a shine to him, and he seems to have transcended every manager that has come in there since.
Angel Di Maria's wife's comments last week, I don't know if they were new or if they were a rehashing of the original comments, or if it was like an updated version of a book that had been published. But certainly they did the rounds, and people were suggesting that it's going to be difficult for some people to settle in Manchester. But it appears as if Anthony has settled in Manchester very well, kissing the badge and then out in the town last night.
Yes, I think he was at Hawksmoor on Deansgate, so it was quite a good choice of restaurant to celebrate his debut. I think Di Maria's wife did say something about the city apparently being dreadful. Well, her experiences of it were dreadful during lockdown a couple of years ago. But the days where foreign players would come to cities in England outside Manchester and just think that the weather was terrible and the food was terrible, it just seemed like they belong to a bygone age now. These cities are so multicultural. You walk along Deansgate, you see the variety of restaurants and also the makeup of the people. It's an extremely diverse city. It appeals to footballers. A lot of footballers have had no problem settling in whatsoever. It seems like the Di Maria's had a hang-up about Manchester because that's the one season where he had an absolute nightmare, and they can clutch at as many straws as they like. But I think Louis van Gaal put it quite well a few years ago, in that he said that he played Di Maria in literally every position, and he didn't play well enough in any of them.
He obviously scored a goal, Anthony, and took it really well. The other bit that United fans will like was the bit of nastiness to him. Like, he was up for this. He was in the face of the Arsenal players throughout. He was leaving the boot in. He was maybe a bit rash at times, was diving into challenges. Like, he is your typical modern footballer, very lean, very quick. But if he has that edge as well, it'll really stand to him.
I mean, it was noticeable, like Lisandro Martinez, his former team at Ajax, how tiny he is as well in the flesh. But it'll be interesting as well to see how with Brazil at the World Cup, with Anthony, Neymar, Richarlison, how many opponents they actually wind up, because they've got quite the skill set there with those three at the very least. I mean, United did need a left-footed forward to balance out that attack. It was far too lopsided. There was an acceptance that they had too many players of a similar profile. Elanga, Martial, Rashford, Sancho, all right-footed, all have played their best football United from the left-hand side. So Anthony was always going to slot in on the right. He was always going to start as well because of the investment. He was a priority target as well. He adapted relatively well to where it was quite a variable half he was having up until he scored, and he scored. It was a beautifully taken goal, the way he just curled it around Aaron Ramsdale and made it look very easy, held his position to stay onside. And he was taken off at a time that, although United were winning, they were a little bit under the cosh, so there had to be an adjustment, and Ten Hag wasn't going to be too sentimental about giving one of these players that he developed into a €100 million player too much time when it was his first game in 3 weeks. So United fans have immediately taken to him, as you expected they would, given his character, and it's not taking him long to kiss the badge, which I'm sure some supporters will turn their nose up about. I think it's probably would have been wiser to give that a little bit longer. But when you score I think he's the first Premier League goal-scoring debut for United since Rashford 6.5 years ago when he was a teenager. So when you tend to start off that well, the fans do take to you very, very quickly.
You've already mentioned it's Sociedad on Thursday, and then the games start to come thick and fast. So the squad will be tested, and I presume we're going to see a good bit more of Casemiro. I do wonder what the final makeup of the midfield is going to be. If you rest Christian Eriksen a bit, given what's happened to him over the last couple of years, or do you just play him every game? It seems like he's unbreakable at the moment. His performance was absolutely sensational. So is this still a team? Like, do we feel like we know that the first choice is going to be maybe Casemiro comes in for McTominay, but everything else is fairly much written in stone at the moment? Or is there room for a midfield trio which evolves over the course of the season? Some games when they think they're going to have a load of ball. They don't play the two number 8s. Some games where they are going to have a load of the ball. What is that midfield as the season progresses, do you think?
I think it will be Casemiro coming in with Ericsson and Fernandez up top. I mean, there was very briefly the suggestion that Ericsson and Fernandez would be incompatible. I never really saw that myself. Ericsson's always had this ability to play from deep, and as I said earlier, he pretty much is occupying that role that Ten Hag had intended De Jong to take on. But in some ways, you'd prefer that to be Ericsson, that he's Premier League experienced. He knows what he can get away with, what he can't get away with. I think in some ways what happened at Brentford, playing Ericsson deep and United getting embarrassed the way they did, might be a blessing in disguise long term, in that it was a wake-up call for Ten Hag, and they did get Casemiro in the following week. They clearly moved, partly because of that result, probably because as well what was going on in the background with the protests, with the fan rancor. So I'd say going forward it will be Casemiro, Ericsson and De Jong. With the Sociedad game, I suspect that will be a game for Casemiro and Fred, which is a pretty good alternative to McTominay and Ericsson, in that Casemiro and Fred start regularly for Brazil. So if you're playing two Brazil starters in your first Europa League group game and that's seen as rotation, that's a much better position the United squad is in this season than it was obviously at the end of last season.
Things have definitely improved. One last question. You mentioned the fan protest and how important it was in sparking the spending spree. Has the fan protest, has the level dissipated somewhat? I mean, anytime we talk about this, we get criticised by the fans saying, oh, nothing, we're still protesting. It's still as big as it ever was. But it certainly doesn't feel as big as it was 2-3 weeks ago. It seems as if a lot of the heat has been taken out of it by the fact that the team is doing well on the field again.
There were protests again yesterday. For ourselves, I was in the Munich tunnel when they were protesting before the Norwich game in April, and where the shutters came down, we missed the start of kickoff. So that's a risk you take. Some colleagues did go out to cover the protest prior to the Liverpool game, and they got back into the stadium, I think the 22nd minute. So about half a dozen of them missed United's best period of the whole match and missed them going 1-0 up, which is not great when you're there to essentially cover a football match. But it was always going to subside after the Liverpool game, and that, as you say, United have won 4 matches since, and the Glazer family, despite the statement coming out from Sir Jim Ratcliffe, spokesman, they have never at any point shown any inclination to sell up. They've obviously made adjustments. There has been, as Ten Hag rather diplomatically said, an adaptation with the budget, in that they went from looking at Arnautovic and Rabiot, who'd have cost barely £30 million between them, to signing 2 players for something like £150 million. So the start of the season has definitely had an impact on enhancing the squad. But I think these things are natural. When things are going well, the rancor is not as febrile as it is when they're going badly. And at the start of the season, it was going very, very badly, and they've managed to turn it around. So the impact of the protests is not going to be as noticeable. It's not going to be as newsworthy as well. I don't think there were any colleagues outside yesterday that were covering it and speaking to a friend who's a season ticket holder who participates in these protests but is aware of how flawed they are. He was not too happy with how it was choreographed yesterday, but it's going to be to different people's tastes. I mean, everybody's going to have an opinion on what the best way forward is, but there's no perfect solution for the United supporters in terms of ousting the Glazers, because as I said, there's a very safe distance between the Glazers and the Manchester United supporters, and that is the Atlantic Ocean.
Samuel, great to have you with us as ever. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
That's Samuel Luckhurst there. You can read his stuff on the Manchester Evening News website. It is 8:39 this morning. If you want to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. 087 9180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Now, the Premier League is back. We've teamed up with one of Europe's largest sports events, ticketing and hospitality companies, Champions Travel, to give you an opportunity to win a €250 Champions Travel voucher every day this week that can be used on Premier League match trips as well as a host of other sporting events. Daily winners will be entered into our grand prize draw, where one lucky winner will win a trip from a selection of Premier League games with flights and 2 nights accommodation included. To enter, just tell us who this.
It's not good enough. It's not good enough.
Speaking on BT Sport after the draw. Who's this?
It's not good enough. It's not good enough.
You can tweet us your guess on our main Twitter account at Off The Ball. We'll announce the winner before the end of the show. That's at Off The Ball on Twitter with your answer. Now, Carl is here. Carl, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How's it going?
What's going on?
Very good. Can't complain now. All well.
You weren't at Electric Picnic over the weekend?
No, I wasn't. I was playing club football.
Oh, yeah?
Here we go.
How'd it go?
Lost by a point.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Who do you play with?
I play with my club in Sligo and Scrone, so like Sligo Intermediate Championship. Yeah, so I'll be sulking for the week.
Who beat you?
Team called Bunnaden. Yeah, so that was yesterday. So
Dennis Scrone not have been hot favourites.
I was going to say.
Juggernauts.
We've at least heard of you guys.
It's not quite on the level of Kilmuckle Crokes and Ballygunner maybe in Waterford yesterday, but anyway.
Sure you could offer free golf membership to the best players around Sligo and
surfing,
drag them all
seaweed
in.
bats, the full works. I mean, if anyone wants to come down, any inter-county footballers, you know.
Wow, and you've been working for weeks to get back from injury and everything.
Yeah.
Is that it over? Straight knockout?
No, we've got 2 more group games left, so we've got 2 games over.
Confidence
the next 2
seems a bit
weekends.
shook though, it's got to be said now after that defeat.
The colour's gone out of my cheeks.
Where were you playing?
I was full back.
Right.
Full back yesterday.
And how many goals did your team cough?
You know what? I actually bad weather on Saturday, right? So I was like, I'm going to buy metal studs. Bought Puma Kings. So apparently that means that you're edging towards the end of your career.
Oh, okay.
I was told by some of the younger players.
Oh, yeah.
So I think the signs are ominous.
Wow.
But
because the brand is so old? Is that what it is?
I don't know. They're solid boots.
Then a lot for the team spirit, is it?
Sure, look.
Surely you're like, that's a Ferrari. Old school, always a Testarossa.
But they were the boots back in the day, I remember.
Yeah.
Well, 15 years ago, 20 years ago?
They had a nice, about a 5-year spell before the Predator came out.
Yeah. The Predator then took over.
But I think the black is coming back into fashion. You see more and more players now.
Yeah. It's really hard to get just plain black boots now from any brand.
Right.
That's what you want. You don't want to...
Puma King didn't work though.
No. Okay. So maybe I'll change boots again for next weekend. Maybe we'll see what happens. But it's good to see the club football and hurling, I think, has taken a new lease of life now because it's got the space kind of to, I suppose, thrive, if you like. I guess it probably hasn't really taken off in the national mindset yet because the county finals and stuff haven't really kicked in yet. I think the Mayo Championship only started yesterday. So.
I think your point about there's loads of group games happening at the moment, and so the jeopardy hasn't arrived yet where it's do or die. They're the games that everybody ends up watching.
Well, it's arrived in Dublin.
Yeah.
Like the group stage finished yesterday for the majority of teams, and like quite a few of the big teams are gone.
Well, you say they're big teams. Your big team is gone, are they?
Tunes were in the final last year.
I mean, that was obviously a fluke.
No, it wasn't. They're constantly in the final.
Flash in the pan.
Got beaten by a point.
Yeah.
I was down at Electric Picnic, but apparently I think there were 7 points up against 14 men in the first half, and I ended up losing by a point.
Yeah. And Ballymunner gone. Lost yesterday. So like Kilmacud against Coola is a big game. Like that's kind of the start of the big games now in the
like Manchester
stage.
City against Newcastle.
The evil empire, is that what you're saying? Sports washing projects. Wow, go on. Keep going there.
Yeah. But
so Crokes,
yeah.
The Crokes story is interesting, right? Because I don't know if everybody saw, but they didn't pick Shane Walsh from the start. But the game was over by the time they even thought about introducing him because Rory O'Carroll scored 2 amazing goals, like kind of slaloming.
O'Carroll's like, hey everybody, remember me?
I mean, and also look, as fresh as he did when he was breaking onto the Dublin team 15 years ago, was it? I mean, probably not 15 years ago, but it's not far off it. It was 10, 20, 09.
Something in the water out there between Rory O'Carroll, Keane O'Sullivan, Paul Mannion. They all look younger now than when they were winning All Ireland a decade ago.
I was going to talk about Mannion because Mannion was absolutely sensational. Like, looked as fit and skinny as a whippet, and obviously playing in America really suited him. I do wonder if there's like a group of inter-county footballers who reach a level where they're like, oh, why do I suffer through the turmoil of being an inter-county footballer when I can just go off to America, have the fun and whatever else, and then come back and play club football in summertime when the weather's good? Why would you suffer through the National League?
Well, are you suggesting that they go back to the county when they...
No, maybe not. What's the...
Well, because you want to test yourself at the very highest level.
They've
Like
already
Paul
done it, a
Mannion's
lot of
been
them
there,
have,
done
yeah.
that.
But
yeah,
if
I
you're-
think understandably, if you get to late 20s, maybe a lot of those guys think, screw it.
I think you're going to
There's
see
more to
some
life.
of the mid-20s going, and the offers from America are going to get bigger and bigger, right? And better and better.
Yeah. And the
only championship that matters.
Well, I mean, it matters. You're going to have your fun whether or not you win, right? So it matters less. It's less stress. And then you come home and you play for the team that everybody keeps telling you means the most anyway. I do wonder if there's like a law of unintended consequences that a lot of very good players are going to go and spend time having crack at a high level and then coming home and doing it for the jersey, and no one can complain. Why won't you play for the county? Oh, I play for my club. I was always a much better club man anyway. But you're
So the crackle, the
I'm talking money. I'm talking money.
The
I'm
crack will
talking
be
money.
so great
Yeah.
that it will outweigh the pride of representing your county.
Well, if you've done it for a couple of years, you know, you have to get to a level where you're gonna, you know, get paid properly in America, right? So you can't. It's not going to be like the lads 26, 27 on the panel, right? Has to be somebody who's had like 3 or 4 years, good years, that would make your team of the league, and maybe an all-star. That kind of category of player who, in their mid-20s, like, I've had enough of this. I've had enough of being
So
shouted
you're
at by
saying is
some...
the wages on the sites in New York are nice.
Attractive. Well, especially if it's one of those no-show jobs.
Cahill, would you dump Enniscrone and spend the
I'm
summer
nowhere
in New
near
York?
good enough to play in the States. Absolutely not.
See, it becomes a badge of honour. Were you good enough to play in the States?
Yeah, exactly.
We put the feelers out for you there. If anybody
Thanks.
needs a fullback who, next season,
Yeah.
coming with the Puma Kings.
Mannion's unbelievable, though. It's like, it is unfair.
Why? Yeah, like him not playing for Dublin next year is a big loss. Like, he is still sensational.
But if you're Desi Farrell, you have to, and Dublin, you have to do everything in your power to try and get him back into the fold. Like, that's the difference probably between Dublin winning the All-Ireland this year maybe and just falling short against Kerry.
It's very close to it anyway, you know?
Well, between him and McCaffrey and Colm being injured.
Yeah.
So is it Kilmacud against Coola in the next round?
I think so,
Oof.
yeah, in the quarterfinals, yeah.
Tasty.
Yeah.
One last thing in this, right? Very small crowd.
Yeah.
And the quality of football on display is very high. Like, there seems to be a disconnect between Dublin supporters and the clubs, and I'm just surprised at that.
Well, with the exception of the final, you never see a big crowd in Parnell Park, it seems. And maybe yesterday it's because it's Kilmacud Crokes against Temple Oak Sink Street, who are about 5 miles apart from each other, but, you know, they're having to go to the north side to play their match. Far enough, Ger.
It's not that far.
Yeah, I live right in the middle of that.
Stop whining about it. It's
Parnell
not
Park
that
is a
far.
long way away.
It really isn't.
What they should be doing is
you live up the
building
mountains.
a nice 15,000-seater stadium on the south side so we don't have to make that trek. It's
Wow.
outrageous.
Wow.
So is it any wonder
They're doing that
there's
anyway.
nobody at these games?
Aren't you getting the one in the
But
Spa?
I think there is a disconnect that's not there in the rural clubs between the senior club team
And
and
the
the
team.
size of the actual club. Like Kilmacud Crokes are the biggest club in the country. Temple Oak wouldn't be one of the bigger clubs on the south side, but you see it regardless of, I think, whether it's Ballyboden, Jude's, Coola, any of them, that with the exception of when you get to the finals, there's not what you would get at in Mayo or Sligo or one of these counties, because, you know, I think people turn up, they bring their kids on a Saturday morning, and that's maybe the connection they have with the club.
Yeah. I wonder, is that fixable? Maybe not.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to note kind of across the board the attendances at the club fixtures throughout this autumn, because obviously the J have given the clubs the space now just to see is there really that interest there that people are going to embrace the club scene kind of in the month of September, when generally speaking in the past you would have been focused on your All-Ireland finals. And
the other thing is the madness of, like, why is the Mayo Championship only starting yesterday? Like, is it to let all the lads go off to New York and enjoy their summer?
Maybe that's genius. I don't know.
But it's we can't have this split season. No, we want to have, you know, players getting play in August now, September, when the weather's a bit better, and then actually we're just going to skip. Like, Mayo went out the championship. It feels like a long time ago. I'm well over the disappointment at this stage.
Are you?
Feels like about 10 weeks ago they were beaten in the championship.
You keep bringing it up.
So why are they only starting now when Dublin have played their entire round robin, when other counties have already had their county finals and Mayo are just starting?
Yeah. Well, then you have the other aspect of it where some counties will give clubs and players time to go away on holidays with their families and stuff, maybe in August time around the August bank holiday. And I think what players want more than anything is certainty with dates, where they're not changing a week or two before the game. If they're given the dates, whether it's that it's going to start in the first weekend of September, if you know that in March or April, then you can kind of plan your year with your family. If you want to go away on holidays and people with kids and stuff, that's pretty important. And
has that been your experience this year in Sligo, that you kind of knew exactly when everything was going to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And the championship probably started in most counties, I would suggest, similar enough time frame, but it's just you have that bit of certainty, I think, and basically that's what players want, I think, around the country. And from the Mayo point of view, I know a lot of players went to America this summer, didn't they? So they're obviously, I would think most of them are back with their clubs now for the club championship, and there was quite a strong league programme in Mayo this year. There was a good league final between Knockmore and Castlebar, and the clubs were well stocked, I think, for the league, and it gave the county players time to take some time off and recharge the batteries as well.
Look, they were assuming they were going to win the All-Ireland. We need a good month of celebration.
There you go.
Optimistic as ever.
Got a plan for success.
Exactly.
Anything else going on?
Well, in the tennis overnight, Nick Kyrgios said he's shown New York his talent. Finally, after beating defending champion Daniil Medvedev to reach the US Open quarterfinals, he knocked out the world number one in 4 sets overnight, and Medvedev now looks set to lose that number one spot in the world. In the women's draw, 5th seed Ons Jabeur safely through after her straight sets win over Vrana Kudermetova. In the men's draw today, Rafa Nadal goes up against Francis Tiafoe, the 22nd seed. In the women's singles, the top seed Iga Swiatek among those in action later on today as well. In the golf over the weekend, Leona Maguire racked up another top 10 finish with a strong showing at the Dana Open on the LPGA Tour. She finished in a tie for 10th on 13 under par, 5 shots behind the winner Gabi Lopez. Max Verstappen has extended his lead at the top of the Formula 1 driver standings to 109 points. He won his home race, the Dutch Grand Prix, finishing ahead of George Russell. And there's racing in Galway this evening, where the first goes to post at 4:10.
All right, good stuff, Carl. It's 8:51 this morning here. If you want to get in touch with us, we'd love to hear from you. 087 180 180. That's the WhatsApp number. You can get us at Off the Ball AM on Twitter, or you can leave a comment on the YouTube stream as well. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day.
Highlight of the weekend and worth checking out online in the MLS. Javier Hernandez has a penalty in the 97th minute for LA Galaxy.
The Little P.
It was a little Panenka, it turned out, from the Little P. He's on for a hat-trick. It's 2-2, the 97th minute. They need this because they're trying to get into the playoffs. And he tries the Panenka and it barely gets off the ground.
Oh, no.
Last kick of the game. End of.
Wow. Sorry, he's for LA Galaxy.
LA Galaxy, yeah.
Not the other LA team that I didn't know existed until Gareth Bale signed for them.
No.
Very good.
He's got all the history and the weight of expectation of the LA Galaxy on his shoulders.
Bale seems to be having a good time.
He has a good time wherever he goes.
Yeah.
Not on the pitch, but
he's looked after himself well. He's, and then he's going to go to the World Cup and wrap it up, and maybe go pro as a golfer.
Quite possibly. Why not?
It is 8:53. We're talking Liverpool now, and an interesting game against Everton at the weekend, but kind of in keeping with Liverpool's season so far. Harriet Prior is with us to pick through it. Harriet, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning. Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. How are you guys?
We're 6 games in. Are there trends emerging from Liverpool's season? It's difficult to get a grip on how well or otherwise Jurgen Klopp feels the team are playing. And luckily enough, Manchester City also dropped points at the weekend, so it wasn't a catastrophic dropping of points, but there's definitely been a sense that maybe they're just not firing at the moment for whatever reason.
Yeah, like you mentioned there, we're 6 games in and we've got 9 points. I think that's not the ideal point you want to be at the start of the season, especially coming off the back of last season when we were fighting on all 4 fronts and we took it right to the last stage of every single competition. It just seems this season like we're just a little bit off it, and I don't know if there's a variety of factors involved, whether there is a bit of a hangover from last season and a few players just are still finding their way a bit, whether they're trying to adapt to the new system. And I think that might be the biggest change for me, is that we've obviously lost Sadio Mane, we've got Darwin Núñez in, and he's more of an out-and-out striker, and we've had to change the formation to adapt to him. And at the moment, it doesn't quite seem to be working, and I don't think you can pin that on individuals. But yeah, there's no denying that we have dropped a lot of points at this stage, and luckily other teams around us have as well, so we're not a million miles off, but I think we need to find our way soon, otherwise we will end up a million miles off.
Liverpool games are almost too entertaining at the start of the season. Like, it was incredible that somehow finished scoreless. Liverpool hit the woodwork 3 times, but Everton had countless chances as well. It's hard to remember, with the exception of, and maybe it's not an exception looking at this season, a couple of years ago with all the injuries, where Liverpool are got at so easily. Like, every time a team comes forward, there's these massive gaps, and it does feel as why Everton's a little bit off. There's also something systemic there that they need to fix quite quickly.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can sort of say there's massive gaps, because I think the style of football they play is high risk and high reward, and they play this high line, and so much is spoken about it, whether it's a good thing or not. But ultimately, it's what's helped us win trophies in the last few years, because we squeeze teams, we push so high up the pitch and play such an attacking style of football. And unfortunately, that does mean, like you mentioned, that sometimes on the counter-attack, there are spaces for the opposition to exploit. And I think that's what we really saw against Everton. There were stages where it was 6 on 3 and they had 6 attackers running forward and we only had 3 defenders back, and they were able to find gaps that shouldn't have existed. But last season, I feel we were more effective at defending from those counter-attacking moments. This season, it sort of has gone a bit wrong, and then we do concede goals, and we do concede goals first in a lot of games, and we were lucky not to concede, we were lucky not to score, but we were also lucky not to concede against Everton, because they had a lot of really good chances. So, yeah, sometimes the goals we consider against the run of play, because we have played so well and then they just manage to catch us on the counter. So something has got to change. It's a control thing for me. How are we controlling the game? Are we letting the opposition control the pace of it? Are we letting them keep the ball too much? Are we being good enough out of possession? Those are questions that I've started to ask.
So is that a midfield issue, or are we coming back to
Well, you look at that midfield at the weekend. Like, Harvey Elliott and Fabio Carvalho are 2 exceptionally talented young players, but they're a world away from Gini Wijnaldum and Jordan Henderson either side of Fabinho, or even Thiago, who, like, there has been a transformation of Liverpool over the last couple of years since Thiago arrived, where they wanted more control. The rock and roll football had gone a little bit, like they were more comfortable in possession and happier in possession, whereas Elliott and Carvalho, I would have looked at and thought, well, Elliott can slot in for Salah, Carvalho can slot in for Diaz. I wouldn't really seen the two of them as real out-and-out central midfielders. Certainly not in a Merseyside derby in a game of... It just feels like they're in a little bit of limbo in what they want from their midfield, or what they can have from their midfield at the moment. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of injuries, and you mentioned some of the names there. Thiago hopefully will be back next week. Carvalho, for me, he hasn't got a best position yet, and you're right, he's a really good, talented young player, but is he going to play in midfield long term? Probably not. Probably will be more of an attacking player. Elliott, I think, will be a out-and-out midfielder, but yeah, the balance is looking a little bit off in most games in that midfield. And Liverpool's midfield is a difficult place to play, because it's just very functional. It supports the fullbacks going forward. It provides chances for the attackers, but it also just shields the back four. And at the moment, it's just not quite clicking. And I think it is funny, because you look at the team at the weekend, and Carvalho, Elliott, Klopp did everything to make sure that we would score a goal and that it wouldn't be a 0-0, another 0-0 in the Merseyside derby. But it just didn't come off, and for whatever reason, I do think that the midfield is a slight problem, but I think that's more caused by the shape. I mean, we changed to a 4-2-4 at the weekend with only 2 midfielders, Elliott being one of the 2, and that for me doesn't work. So how are we going to support them best? How are we going to make sure that the shape is working for the midfield that are a little bit inexperienced at the moment, and provide chances? Because at the moment, that's not quite coming off.
We should talk about Mo Salah as well. What is the... I mean, look, is it just a weird thing where the... misses have happened together, or the opportunities haven't fallen together in a sequence, and that sequence will just be broken through randomness? Is that what we're seeing, or is there something about the new players and the new partnerships, and actually he's missing the settled nature of the relationship that he'd built up over 5 or 6 seasons with his previous duo who he was playing with? I mean, for Firmino, obviously he's played with Firmino a good bit this season as well. So what's your take on what's going on with Mo Salah at the moment?
Yeah, he has obviously missed chances that you'd expect him in previous seasons or previous games to have finished. But I think for me, it's again a shape thing where he feels so far away from the goal in a lot of games. Like Firmino, he comes on and he drops so far back. Salah's just pulled really far out wide, and I don't know if that is to facilitate Darwin coming in, and the fact that they haven't quite formed their partnership yet, as hopefully they will later on in the season. So yeah, for me, it's less that there's a problem with him as an individual. It's more that he's just a bit far away from goal to even make the most of opportunities that come his way. So, yeah, it's that one long term doesn't particularly worry me. I think they'll work that out. I think he'll work out the positions he needs to be in to help Darwin, and Darwin likewise with him. Because I still do think some of the connections on the pitch have worked well, like Harvey Elliott and Mo Salah's sort of relationship on the pitch they're building is going well for me. So it's an interesting one, but I would like all of the attackers to start finishing some of the chances they get soon, because hit the post twice on, 3 times, I think, actually, at the weekend. And it's frustrating when you just think, one of those chances has got to go in, but they don't. So, yeah, the finishing ability, but we know that's not a problem. It shouldn't be a problem. So, yeah, I'd just like to see Salah and Diaz getting a little bit closer to the goal in the next few games.
It's interesting when you said duo there alongside Salah, and you're talking about Nunez and Diaz, or Firmino and Mane. I was thinking more Henderson and Alexander-Arnold as the duo for Salah,
because
who got the best out of them. Because so many Liverpool goals over the last 5 years come the same way, where there's the overlap from Alexander-Arnold. Salah just step back, he'll pick the ball up on the edge of the area, something will be created from there. And the cover that Henderson provides to allow Alexander-Arnold to get into that position. And I don't think you can underestimate the importance of Henderson's injuries and decline, a natural decline, on Liverpool's struggles. The energy he brought, like, I've been saying this for years, maybe the most underrated player in modern football has been what Jordan Henderson has done for Liverpool, and how he allowed Alexander-Arnold play his best, how he provided so much cover, so much energy, intensity to the style of football that Jurgen Klopp wanted. Like, their record in big matches for years with Henderson when he played in the middle of midfield was insane. And now he's just not quite there. He definitely looks like injuries are getting on top of him a little bit. He's making very uncharacteristic mistakes. And how they replace him is maybe the most important decision. And you do wonder if they've been a little bit hesitant again, Harriet. I heard Jamie Carragher last week saying, like, they probably need a full new midfield over the next 12 months. Like, they'll be looking at 2 or 3 players. And should they've gone and tried to, they'll have their targets. Should they've come forward and brought one of them and spent the money now? Because there is recent history of Liverpool delaying, whether it was centre halves when the injury crisis struck, whether it was sticking with Loris Karius for a season too long. That, would you be worried already that you'd be reflecting on this season going, they've left themselves short in midfield, when it was obvious from the start of the season that they might be short in midfield?
Yeah, I think there's a few things to reflect on there. I think you're right to say it is sort of a problem on that right-hand side. It is that link up between the 3 of them, and he takes Trent off in the second half of the weekend, which I didn't think helped us to create any chances at all, because, like you say, so many of our goals come from Trent assisting Salah, and that connection on the right with Henderson a key part of that. I don't necessarily think that Henderson has sort of dropped drastically in form this season when he was playing well at the end of last season. I think that maybe he just, like you mentioned there, because there is a lack of midfielders, he hasn't got the significant and sufficient rest that he needs to be able to come in the games that he does need to play well in and perform to his best level. And I also think he's getting to the age now maybe where he needs to be in that number 6 role rather than a more attacking midfielder. So him and Fabinho could sort of switch. And then I would have liked to have seen another attacking midfielder come in, and we know that Jude Bellingham is a long-term target, and come in and slot in that position, and that would have allowed a whole load of freedom for our attack, for our midfielders, and it would have allowed Henderson to get more of a rest. So there does need to be a transformation. And you mentioned there we did wait for Konate, and that did cost us sort of a really, really good season when we had all those defensive injuries, because we waited till the summer to bring our long-term target in. And I do feel a little bit like we've done that again. We've waited too long, and we know that we want Jude Bellingham, but is he even going to be available next year? Do we know with certainty that we're going to get him? Absolutely not. So I would have liked to have seen another attacking midfielder come in. Obviously, we brought in Arta. We don't know what he's going to be like, where he's going to slot in yet, so we've got to bide our time a little bit and see how he gets on. But yeah, definitely providing Henderson with a bit more rest is key moving forward, especially if he's starting to pick up a few more injuries. And then the same goes for Thiago and Fabinho as well. But yeah, definitely need a bit of revigoration in that midfield area going into next season in particular.
That season that we were talking about, where the centre-backs, the injury crisis hit, it was a real struggle for Liverpool to get into the Champions League in the end of that season. And so, that's not that long ago. Everybody remembers it. Is there a fear that this season could get away? Or does City's result at the weekend kind of ease a little bit of those fears and actually give everybody a bit of calm? This is all fine, don't worry about it. And it's going to be a weird season anyway, with like the season now and then the season after the World Cup as well.
Yeah, that season was a struggle for a variety of reasons, but I think this one is very different in its nature because that came after the Christmas period, and we sort of knew that this was going to be our situation for the rest of the season. We were going to have to cope without any defence or any senior defensive players, and we knew that was the situation we were left with after January. This is a bit different in that we know players are going to come back. We know Thiago's back in training this week, hopefully. We don't know the extent of some of those midfielders' injuries, but hopefully Artemelo settles in quickly, and then some of these other players start to come back. So I think it is slightly different in its nature in that season we kind of knew we were left with what we had. Now we can think ahead, okay, who are we getting back? How are we going to use them? How are they going to make a difference? And how can we push forward from here? You can't say all is lost when you are 6 points behind the lead and 5 points behind Manchester City. I don't think it's feasible to say all is lost at this point in the season, but change does need to come, and we need to start getting results very soon because you can't afford to drop many points in seasons when teams are getting over 90 points, as has been the reality of the last few years.
Is there any frustration amongst the fan base at the lack of spending? And if there is that because they think Klopp doesn't want to spend the money right now because the players aren't available, or do they blame FSG for not investing in the playing stock?
It's definitely nothing to do with Klopp. I think that he's been quite clear that he doesn't control what the club spends its money on, and he was quite clear that he wanted another midfielder in the last sort of period of the transfer window, so I don't think anyone's necessarily blaming Klopp. There are obviously elements of the fan base that would like to spend more money on players and that are frustrated that FSG haven't come and done that, and that they feel that other teams have had so much money spent, especially in this window. You look at Arsenal, Tottenham, City bringing in more players, and why have we not brought in more? There will always be fans that want more players in, and I think that's absolutely fair enough. So I don't think that it lies on Klopp, but I think there is a part of the fan base that is frustrated at FSG and the fact that there hasn't been more investment in a team, because we feel this is a team that could win everything because there's so much raw talent in there. And I think, just one or two more reinforcements would go a long way. But maybe in January we'll see where the situation lies, and another player will be brought in to sort of ease those difficulties. We'll see. That frustration never really, or this is a question, does that frustration ever find voice amongst the fans in form of protest, or how does it manifest itself? Not really so far. I think mainly I just see stuff on Twitter, to be honest. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much I can comment on that. But no, not at the moment. I think you can, look at Manchester United and the situation they're in with their ownership, and there is protest and a lot of discomfort. I think most elements of our fan base can recognise there are strengths of FSG and there are weaknesses as well. But we'll see what happens in the future. But no protests yet. The Champions League group, nice of Manchester United to sign all of Ajax's best players to make sure that it's a much easier Champions League group for Liverpool. Obviously they've got the trip to Napoli this week. The squad, is the squad big enough at the moment, Harriet, to be able to compete on all four fronts the way they did last season? Yeah, I think the Champions League will be a welcome change, to be honest. It would be nice to be in another competition and put the struggles in the Premier League to the back of their minds a bit. The squad, yeah, I think the squad will be fine. If we can get through the group stages and just make sure that we don't sort of need to do anything drastic, pick up points away from home and get wins at Anfield, and hopefully we'll be able to do that. Although, our results haven't been great, we should be okay. And then by the time we get through the group stages, hopefully our squad will be back to a bit more normality. We've already seen Jota back at the weekend, was a huge boost. So yeah, I feel hopefully confident about the Champions League and getting through the group. So we'll see how the next few weeks pan out. But I think the squad depth shouldn't be a problem. Hopefully come the end of the group stages. So just get through those and see where we end up.
Yeah, it does feel like it's sort of just damage limitation at the moment. So get a bit of momentum in the Champions League, because suddenly you don't want to be in a position where you're going into those last couple of games and you desperately need to win and you're having to put out your full starting 11. And likewise in the Premier League, the positive for Liverpool is they've played as poorly as they have, and they're only 5 points behind Manchester City. They meet middle of October at Anfield. Like, you want to be in a position in that where, if you win, you're close. You're within a couple of points in them. Yeah. You don't want to be in a position that if you lose and you're 12 points behind, it's all over and it's gone. Yeah, that would be a disaster. But I think those injuries, like Jota on the bench, that was a big step forward. And if they are going to get Thiago back, that does give them a completely different outlook. And the positives are Carvalho and Elliott. Like, Carvalho has settled in straight away. He's had his moment. Like, that moment is a standout one that you waited an entire career for, the goal against Newcastle. And Harvey Elliott, I see a lot of talk in the papers this morning about the England squad for the World Cup. Like, he has the potential to be world class.
Okay. All right, Harriet, good stuff. Thanks a million.
Thanks so much. Bye.
That's Harriet Prior from the Anfield Wrap there, giving us her thoughts on the situation at Liverpool. 9 minutes past 9. There's definitely simmering tension among some of the Liverpool fans in our comments. Where is the one that I was looking for particularly? Why is nobody saying the truth here? I don't really think it's been said enough. Mane is such a loss with his work rate, says Shane Dunn. Not one of Liverpool's front three do this. Now Salah's counting his money. Darwin is an overrated Andy Carroll. Diaz is selfish. Wow.
Is the Andy Carroll comparison just because of the sort of long hair and the ponytail and all that?
Plays for Liverpool.
Yeah. Like, Salah was always a peculiar one in that there would often be games where he'd be somewhat anonymous and they'd struggle to get him into it, and then out of nothing he's suddenly got 2 goals. Things aren't falling for them. They're not playing particularly well, but also, as I say, they're hitting the woodwork 3 times. Like Salah, right at the end of the game, should score. Nunez scores that goal. You've scored in the derby. Everything's forgotten about with the red card. But yeah, things aren't perfect. And if this season falls away, I think there will be a lot of questions about the ownership, because while they spent big on Darwin Nunez, like if Jurgen Klopp wants a midfielder and not giving him a midfielder, what the hell are you doing? Like, look at his track record.
Doesn't make any sense, does it? And
as brilliant as he is at developing players, and as brilliant as he was with Trent and with Andy Robertson and even Salah and Jota, but the difference is Alisson and Van Dijk.
Yeah.
That was the transformative moment. They bought the best goalkeeper, they bought the best centre half, and they spent the money.
And they're really rich. And
exactly.
As an ownership group, they don't get anything like the same level of protest or...
Well, they're not taking the money out of the club the way the Glazers are.
Are we sure about that? Like, do we know everything about how the finances run? And haven't they...
They're redeveloping this. Like, again, part of Manchester United problems are deep. Look at Old Trafford.
Sure.
Like, it's
just one point on that though, right? They are redeveloping the stadium, but they have allowed the whole area to go into rack and ruin. And like most of the stuff that was written about that stopped getting written about because they hired the people who were doing the writing about it. Do you know, like they're not this socialist organisation who are investing in the city of Liverpool for the good of the city of Liverpool. They've spotted an opportunity to make loads and loads and loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of money.
Absolutely.
Now, it's a different way of running the money side of it from what Manchester United are doing, and it's probably less naked. But we shouldn't confuse why FSG got involved. It's at some point they'll sell and they'll take the cash out then.
And what will Liverpool be worth? Like, all of these owners are looking at what happened with Chelsea and $2.5 billion and thinking, well, if they're worth that, like, what are Liverpool worth now, and the profit that can be made? So money can't be that big of an issue.
No, it really isn't. And so they've been completely tight with the purse strings at a time when they could have invested and kept Liverpool toe for toe with City, which is very difficult because Manchester City have like this massive advantage in the fact that they're backed by a state, and that the sports washing thing is like a real thing. And Manchester City have also managed to completely skirt financial fair play, as have PSG. And anyway, that's all broken. But could Trent Alexander-Arnold switch to midfield and maybe invest in a right back? They need to think about this, or because he has the energy.
I know the analysts would point out that like the weakness in Alexander-Arnold's game is defensively, and that would also be an issue when he's playing in midfield, that he doesn't have that bit of awareness to look over his shoulder and realise when the run is being made.
Maybe he's not going to be the exact same player as Jordan Henderson, but he'll give... So what you...
But why? But you don't want him to be Jordan Henderson. Like, Trent Alexander-Arnold is a generational fullback. Yes, defensively he makes too many mistakes, but the reason they have him there is because they shouldn't have to defend. Liverpool's entire system is built on the defenders not having to defend, that they're always pressing, it's always high up, that 90% of what Alexander-Arnold does is in an attacking sense. Where the problems have always occurred is when that's been flipped and teams get at them. So if Liverpool continue to struggle to hold on to possession the way they have and continue to struggle to turn over teams in midfield, Alexander-Arnold is going to continue to get exposed. But like, he's more assists than anybody. Like, he constantly creates goals. Why would you try and take out one of your biggest strengths because he costs you what is still the odd goal? I know teams are starting to target him, but if the midfield was functioning, they wouldn't be able to target him.
And is Joe Gomez good enough?
I think Joe Gomez again feels like he has a mistake in him, and
not a great thing for centre back,
and has obviously had a huge amount of injuries, and is behind Konate. Like, if Konate and Matip, so he's basically fourth choice centre half, but that's where they are again. Now Matip was back. Kanate is probably still a little bit away. Like, Joe Gomez should be good enough to fill in for 2 or 3 matches.
Okay, so
but I do honestly think that nearly all their problems are stemming from midfield.
Okay, I can see that. I do. So the Athletic had their piece about Salah, and Salah's touches are like 10 fewer touches in the Everton game than he had on average 2 seasons ago, and it's like 5 in last season. So he's definitely seeing less of the ball. Doesn't seem to be that much further from goal, but they're working that out, and you would assume they will. Andy Robertson being dropped for that game. Was he dropped for that game? Is that a dropping? Are we now entering a situation where he really likes Tsimikas and he's going to give Tsimikas minutes in big games? Was Robertson somehow rested for the Napoli game in a way? Is there load management happening?
I think we're going to see this from all the squads. Maybe there's something deeper going on, and there was definitely a period last season where it looked as though Tsimikas was going to put real pressure on Andy Robertson, and Robertson responded. And Tsimikas come on for the final 20 minutes of the last couple of matches, even at times when Robertson was playing well, and they could well be looking at the data and the injuries are picking up and saying he's hitting some sort of a red zone, we need to take him out. But they also need to start quickly, and I think the next month is going to be just one of the most interesting we've seen in the Premier League as to how teams approach it and how many changes they're making game on game when they are playing every 3 days. And I always think it's only when you sit down and think about how actually these days go and how little work they can do and how little training and having to fly straight after a match, and then you get 1 day there and then you're straight back and you've got another massive game.
Yeah, well, he's been complaining about that. Oh, don't worry, Klopp.
But they'll all be complaining about that.
Right, 16 minutes past 9 this morning here on OTB AM. We'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number, and we're brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Here's what's on OTB Sports Radio for you today. At 1 o'clock, Keith Andrews meets Philly McMahon. Splonk is live at 3. Culture Hall of Fame is Peter Cunningham, and OTB Gold is Sonia O'Sullivan at 6. Make sure you follow us across all our social channels. We're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, we're on TikTok, and you can get us on our 2 Twitter accounts as well, or multiple ones really. Back after this break with Alan Quinlan. First, here's Stephen Doyle speaking with Graham Gartland about the summer transfer window and the problems at Leicester.
I suppose transfers is the big thing for Rodgers. That's his big complaint, and we saw the owners coming clean with the supporters last week in the programme notes, or during the week I should say, to say that look, they spent so much over the last few seasons, they don't have the money there to spend on transfers. They brought in one player, Fout Face, who stayed on the bench today, and Brendan Rodgers just looks really, really unhappy, and you just wonder, has he kind of packed it in almost himself, and could we see him maybe leaving before Christmas?
I think if there's a disconnect between what the owners can give you and what you as a manager want to achieve with your team, I think that's going to cause disruption at the club. So I wouldn't be surprised if I see Rodgers leave over that. I know we had similar arguments with Liverpool about that they had a group of people that was
transfer committee,
yeah. And I know he didn't agree with that, and eventually one of the reasons he's left Liverpool was because he called that out. He says, I don't know who we're signing, that's down to the committee, and it's one of the reasons that I think Liverpool lost patience with him and moved him on. And at Celtic he had a freedom to sign who he liked, and he had that he had ultimate control of the football club really, but he delivered success for them, so that's what came. I think when he got the job at Leicester, it was maybe to try and push on and challenge for Champions League places and to try and break that monopoly of the top 4 and always be in the top 6. But again, you can't help business around the world are being affected by loads of different things. Some clubs have come through it stronger, some haven't, and Leicester are one of the ones that have struggled. And I think Leicester fans would rather the club was run diligently rather than overspending and something happen where the club gets put into trouble financially. So from that point of view, I think that the owners have to be careful.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Off the ball.
I don't think Springboks are in crisis because you would hate for a team that is so phenomenally good a year out from the World Cup to be world number 1 and then to go out in the quarterfinals.
Yes, Stephen, we know.
Subscribe to the rugby stream on the OTB Sports app now.
If your business relies on a van, that wouldn't sound good, but this does. Get up to 75% off van insurance. Now available in FBD branches nationwide. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. 75% no claims discount based on 5 years claims free. Available on new van policies. Used for farm or business purposes. Terms and conditions apply. Underwritten by FBD Insurance plc. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
All right, Alan Quinlan is with us. Alan, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Morning, lads. Good, thanks.
Natural order restored at the weekend. An absolute hammering handed out by the All Blacks to Argentina, and Springboks beating Australia. So is that the truth of the situation? Is that really where we are at the moment? The previous week was a bit of a fluke, or what do you think?
It's difficult to gauge where they're all at now, Ger. I think we had a situation with Ireland where they won that second test, and you think, is there going to be that kind of a reaction in the third test? That didn't happen. Ireland obviously went on and won. This was a similar situation for Argentina. Could they kind of deal with kind of that angry response from New Zealand? And they weren't able to. It was a complete role reversal from last week. New Zealand struggled at the breakdown. Argentina were very physical, winning last week, and the opposite was the case this week. In fact, in both matches, it was the opposite. It was an angry reaction that Argentina and Australia couldn't deal with. The way the rugby results are gone, the rugby championship results are gone. They're quite strange. You get one big performance and then you lose the following week, and vice versa. And it's been happening to all the teams. And New Zealand are top of the pile now on 10 points. The four teams, they've played 4, lost 2, won 2, each of them. But they were pretty ruthless, New Zealand, this week. I think the conditions were really terrible in Hamilton, and their accuracy and execution was so much better, and they were very aggressive. And so I think that gives them hope again. And I've said this probably since before the Ireland tour. I think this team are impatient. They're obviously not as good as the teams that won previous World Cups, and particularly the team in 2015, which was probably one of the best teams we'll ever see. But given that, for the first time in their history last week, they lost 3 consecutive home matches. They're making a lot of kind of unwanted records, if you like, this group. But Ian Foster stuck with the same players this week and gave them a chance, and they did respond. But I don't think they've been properly coached. It sounds crazy for, historically the best team in the world. Joe Schmidt is obviously kind of involved with a hands-on approach now, and I think they're a side that, and what I've seen in the last few months, is they're pretty impatient. They try and score after 2, 3, 4 phases. And they're probably used to doing that. And then when it doesn't happen, they force things a little bit. And so I think they probably can take a lot of confidence out of that. And it was a ruthless performance. They were very, very aggressive. But if you're a New Zealand rugby fan now, you would want them to be consistent, even if they lose a game here and there, which they probably will going forward, that they're in the fight, and it's not a poor performance that they're getting, but that was so much better from them this week.
One of the things that you wanted to talk about was the difference between the referees week on week in the Rugby Championship. And it's always interesting because, very subtly between the first and the second test, Ireland brought up that specific issue of the New Zealanders coming through the rucks and taking the man out on the far side of the ruck. They got pinged for it the following week. We got a lot of penalties. It helped us flip field position, and we won the game. I'm not saying it's the only reason we win the game, but certainly it helps.
It makes a huge difference, Ger. It makes a huge difference, and that was the issue for Ireland. And again, the last 2 weeks, complete change in the refereeing and the decisions that went to either side.
And last week, I was going to just make the point that the New Zealand coaching ticket made a big play about bodies not rolling away and lying on the side of the ruck, and Cheika's like, well, you know all about it. And lo and behold, something changes this week. And you're kind of thinking, again, not to bring it all back to Razzie, but Razzie goes on this crazy offensive. The video gets leaked. And it just seems as if you're not complaining about the referee, if you're not in advance warning the referee about the opposition, then you're not playing the game at the moment.
Yeah, and it's becoming very, very frustrating for coaches right across the board. From URC to Champions Cup to international matches, you get a bad performance and you get some kind of crazy decisions. And we see what's happening with VAR in the Premier League at the moment. you know, you have video referees, I think, trying to help the referees out on the fields. And rugby is very difficult at times. You know, it's very easy to go back and look in videos and see players coming in from the side, players not rolling away, different things that should have been penalised, not getting picked up. And rugby's a game that seems to kind of go one way very, very much. Everyone will have a decision here or there, but I thought in both those games last week, the refereeing was really poor. In the New Zealand-Argentina game and the Australia-South Africa game. I thought that it was very inconsistent, and it does have a massive effect. And you correctly point out that Ireland had big issues with New Zealand at the breakdown in that first test in July. They were highlighted, and a lot of stuff changed the following week. And Jaco Piper ref the second test, and you could continually hear him warning New Zealand about side entries, taking players out beyond the breakdown, which wasn't penalised in the first test. And the frustration, the crazy thing there, I couldn't believe that New Zealand kept doing the same thing, because I always remember Joe Schmidt and stuff coming out of the Irish team when they went through that period from kind of 14 up to the World Cup, that he had this policy of highlighting incidents after a game that weren't penalised, but probably should have and could have been penalised against Irish players, and how they prevent those kind of pictures that they're presenting. New Zealand didn't adapt to that situation at all from the first test to the second test, and then lo and behold, I think it was 3 or 4 penalties in Dunedin, that second test, that they were penalised against. And we saw the similar trait last week. Paul Williams refereed the Australia-South Africa game. I thought some of his decisions were baffling, and they had a big effect on the result, and caused a lot of frustration to the South Africans. Nika Amash Ukeli, the Georgian referee, who's relatively inexperienced at international level, I thought he was really, really poor in that first test. And if you're getting away with stuff, I know it from my own kind of experience, if you're getting away with kind of slowing ball down at breakdowns and stuff like that by the referee, you're going to keep doing it. It's not that, it's just if a referee doesn't warn you, you're going to keep fighting for the ball and, lying on the wrong side and all that stuff. And obviously when you play New Zealand, you want to try and stop their flow. So I thought last week the refereeing was really, really poor. I listened to Nigel Owens talking about it as well, and he was the one who was really, I had this feeling after the game, but he spoke openly about it last week. And that needs to be sorted out, that you get it. You don't need a Razzie Erasmus but all these coaches, Ger, they all do this.
I know that, but
internally.
I know we know that they do it internally. Like, not to revisit and relitigate it, but like the leaking of it is the bit where, and I think as well the tone and the language that was used. But I if you're not doing that now, if you're not trying to influence the referee, then you're actually putting your team at a disadvantage, because they do seem to be very easily influenced.
Yeah, well, I think Joel Juge, the head of the referees, like, he will give the feedback to all these players. And in fairness, they'd be pretty harsh on decisions. They go through them with a fine-tooth comb. So it's hard being a referee. And, Razzie's thing probably is not the right approach, because, you're kind of turning guys away. In fairness, they get very much exposed. They get a lot of abuse online.
Yeah.
Which we don't want to create a situation like that. But I think collectively, without kind of individualizing this, there's always going to be 1 or 2 decisions where, a team have a line out 5 yards out, they go up, somebody grabs a hand, it's not seen by the referee, it's not seen by the assistant referees, and the opposition win the ball, clear their lines. That situation was a try-scoring opportunity for a team, and maybe would have won the game. You have a culmination of those little things at scrums, at breakdown, a couple of decisions that were wrong, and you end up with 6, 7, 8 of these decisions in a game, and they do influence the scoreline big time. And it's the inconsistency of these situations. So kind of directives from last season, particularly at the start of this season, was less input from the TMO, if possible.
Yeah.
So the message is sending now is, well, don't intervene in these little situations where I think they just need to work better.
But
and
Quinny, were we not 18 months ago going TMOs were refereeing the games? Like, particularly because we ended up quite often where the more senior referee was the TMO rather than the referee on the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely, and we didn't want that. And Nigel Owens, who I reference again, he was one saying that they instinctively they have to referee the game themselves. But assistant referees are always pulling for the offside line. They need to watch these small, intricate things, side entries and stuff like that. And it's hard on the referee. You need to have a swivel on your head to see some of the stuff that's going on. Maybe a situation, Nathan, where the TMO can talk directly to the referee without everybody hearing it. That something has gone on that they need to have a look at. But look, it's a fine line between stopping the game up. But my point is here. Last week you had lots of these incidents, and this week I think you've two games that are refereed better, and we're seeing a lot of that.
And look,
we're seeing a reaction kind of performance from the referees. So look, it's a difficult job, but
definitely. And you do forget as well that obviously you hope that this is the referees, and the panel of good referees being built and broadened. So by the time the World Cup rolls around, we're not left with inexperienced referees who are crumbling under the pressure, as we've seen at World Cups before. Wasn't it the Scotland?
And to be fair, Ger, they do review the games, and they're kind of they do get a fair rap on the knuckles from Joel Juge, and all the time.
Yeah, no, that's as it should be, really. You wanted to ask about the Emerging Ireland stuff.
Yeah, obviously this was announced last week, so they're going for a 3-game mini tour in South Africa. I was listening to Mike Prendergast talk about it from a Munster point of view, and how, again, they're just going to have to adapt and accept the fact that the player's going to be missing for, well, it'll probably end up in maybe up to a month, all in. And whether it's the right thing to do mid-season to be bringing these players away from their province, like, it does seem to undermine the URC massively.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard one, Nathan. Obviously, the international team will get preference, and it's 12 months from now they'll be in France for a World Cup. So I didn't know anything about this, or very few people knew anything about it. I think the provincial squads, the 4 provincial squads throughout Ireland, will obviously deep down be a little bit frustrated. They're trying to build for URC in 2 weeks. But it's the weekend after next. They're in URC action, and you don't want to start out, in particular, Munster away to Cardiff, then they're away to Dragons. If they get a number of their players taken out, will it affect those early rounds? Leinster can probably cope with it a little bit better, depending on when their internationals are kind of integrated. I don't think they'll play the first couple of games, but yeah, certainly it's kind of a catch-22. If it depends the caliber of player that's brought. I presume it'll be some of these guys who are in New Zealand, and it's a difficult situation, because if they go there and play games and it benefits them, and we're talking about this next year, World Cup, saying it was a masterstroke that Ireland developed more strength and depth, built more confidence. Got that block of kind of coaching and preparing together, we'd be saying it's a great thing. But it's a tricky one. I'm not really sure. But look, the provinces have big squads. They've got to adapt and just go with it. And usually the Irish provinces are up near the top of the table anyway. So I don't think you get any sympathy from the Welsh or from the Scots or the Italians.
Does Kieran Frawley go and play every minute out half, or do they?
Well, that'll be the interesting thing, as Quinny said. Is this a reaction to the New Zealand tour, where there wasn't much experimentation, and while those guys got the midweek games, do they now bring them down again and actually give them a lot of game time? I guess part of it, Quinny, as well, is getting used to that environment of games quickly together, reacting, how the Ireland management team works, how they analyse games, how they feed back information, and getting players used to it. But I think that'll be the most interesting thing. Is it the Kieran Frawleys, or is it a level below that? Guys who are maybe even barely getting into the provincial squads.
Yeah, well, we don't know that yet. So I think, look, I think that you'd kind of be handpicking a number from each province to try and keep it fairly even, if possible. You know, if you take 10 or 12 from Leinster and 3 from Munster and 4 from Connacht, or 4 or 5 from Ulster, I think if they kind of balance it out a little bit, there won't be much given out. But look, they've got to pick who they think is best.
You're not bringing Jack Carty.
I don't know. I think someone like Jack Crowley in Munster, if you're talking about an out half with potential to maybe get up the next level.
Like Carty obviously was injured and so couldn't go, and so maybe you do bring Carty and say, this is a chance for you to get into the World Cup squad, and we're going to pitch you like it's a dogfight between you and Frawley to play these 3 games, and how you appear in training and how you appear in the meetings is what we're judging you on. Like I don't know, unless
and if it's an emerging Ireland, I think it's kind of the next level down. I think the whole reason of having the matches would be to bring, probably from 30 onwards, not from 50 onwards. You know what I mean?
Jacob Stockdale, is he in the squad?
Yeah, well, if he's back playing, and that's a big boost for Ulster and Ireland as well. He's been out for over a year, which is, he's obvious international quality and talent. So, yes, of course, I think he should go. But I think they kind of bring as many as it's the next level of guys who they think maybe they can get 5 or 6 of these guys to step up and really believe in them. You said it, Nathan, there. I think the whole benefit of being away for over 3 weeks together and as a group is the preparation, the individual stuff with the coaches, the video analysis, all that kind of stuff, and building confidence and belief that they can step up to that international level. I've always said this, and I've seen it in my own career when young players come in training with the Irish squad, they kind of grow a foot taller. They believe that, if it's managed right, some guys can lack a little bit of confidence if they play and they don't play well. But emerging players and young players being in an environment that's pretty intense, and I think a lot of it would be to get them up to speed with the type of game, the type of coaching, and maybe some of them might get obviously a lot of them would get a look in then for Fiji for November, and with a possibility of a few of them squeezing into the Six Nations squad. So overall, I think it'll be beneficial. And look, it has to happen. We've asked for things to be, done differently because of the disappointments of the last World Cup. This is something different. This isn't something they just picked and decided to do after coming back from New Zealand. I think it was probably in the offing and the planning before that. And I think overall the Irish squad and the World Cup preparations have to take preference.
I think that's fair enough. I think if they didn't do something like this, and we were, so I wonder, is there something specific that they're looking for? Is it Frawley, like, or do they put?
Possibly,
maybe if they're going to South Africa, maybe it's the front row, and they're.
I think it's very difficult to go down and play the Griquas and the Cheetahs and really know where they're at. Let's be honest. Some of the provincial A teams could probably give them a go. I'm not being disrespectful. One thing they will get is a real physicality. There's no doubt about that. But from a skills point of view, I think they'll be fine. So you're not exposing these guys to international standard kind of pace, tempo, all that kind of stuff. But I think it's more the internal building blocks that they can try and achieve with the group and spend time with the coaches, because even though the Irish coaches, they're around all the time, they don't have this hands-on approach with a lot of these young fellas. So I think they'll really look at the skill development and where guys need to work and what they need to do to get up to the next level. So I think that could be incredibly beneficial for both sides.
All right, we got to leave it there. Alan, good stuff. Thanks a million.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Alan Quinlan giving us his thoughts there, as he is every Monday and every Friday here on OTB AM. A reminder that Braeburn Coffee is the official coffee partner of OTB. Every week we give one lucky viewer a €100 voucher to spend on some Braeburn coffee goodness at an Applegreen store near you. To enter, just check out @OffTheBall on Twitter, like and retweet our Braeburn competition post, and you'll be in the draw. Braeburn Coffee never compromises on quality or taste to give you the best on-the-go coffee experience on the road. Available at Applegreen today. Right, still to come, Kenny Cunningham's full-time response to Man United against Arsenal. He wasn't having the stepovers. just before Anthony's
Oof.
goal. He
No.
was like, I was like, Kenny,
Kenny's
come on.
distaste for tricky wingers.
Yeah. I mean, come on. That's it.
There's a thin line, like, is he going to be Ronaldo or is he going to be Nani? Was Nani? Nothing wrong with Nani, was there, actually?
Well, he won plenty of medals.
Exactly.
Nani Anderson.
The only thing that he was angry about was VAR.
Which I think we're about to hear, are we?
Yeah.
All right. So we're back tomorrow. Shane Hannon's in studio. We're going to look ahead to another massive night for Vera Pauw's side as they travel to face Slovakia. They're already obviously there. Sue Roton's going to rejoin us. Jenny Claffey talking tennis. Matt Williams on the show as well. Right now, we're going to leave you with some Kenny Cunningham goodness. Enjoy this.
So, Kenny, the Manchester United revival continues. 4 wins in a row.
No clean sheet. Disaster.
What's the point of it? What's the point of it? 65 minutes gone. Arsenal have just equalised. They have come flying out of the blocks in the second half. How did Manchester United stop that momentum and end up winning that game?
Yeah, it was interesting. I felt they had to do something before that, before the equalising Arsenal goal. You could see it coming. Nathan just getting swamped a little bit, particularly in central midfield. I thought McTominay and Eriksen were struggling a little bit. Arsenal getting plenty of overloads in there. They were pushing them back. They were pretty incessant in terms of their pressure. You felt as if substitutions had to come. They did. They were strange ones though. Ronaldo came on. And Rashford got flipped over to the right hand side, so immediately you're looking at it thinking, I'm not exactly sure of that substitution, but yeah, it was amazing really. It was amazing what transpired next. Manchester United getting penned in, like I said, but always you feel as if it got an opportunity in terms of counter-attack. Made a point about Arsenal before the game. They'd fancy their chances to pick Manchester United up because of the pace they have down the sides. Saka, Martinelli and Jesus to an extent. But I'm sure Manchester United probably would have felt the same, the pace of Rashford and Jadon Sancho in particular. Anthony was an interesting one. Was watching him in that kind of first half. You know, you're looking at him, and obviously I've seen him play for Ajax, but you know, you're looking at him up close, you're looking at his qualities. Kind of technically very good, little schemer, low centre of gravity. Didn't strike me as somebody that with a huge kind of turn of pace in terms of going past somebody in those 1v1 situations. So that was interesting. And when you have players like that in the team, you need other players to complement them who do have the pace, Nathan, to get in behind and stretch teams in behind. So those players like Anthony can come on the inside and find those little pockets to play. And that's what United had today with the pace of Rashford in behind down those central areas. And he was key, obviously, goes without saying, for those second and third goals. The second goal, he shouldn't even have been there, really. The substitution made, he was flipped onto the right. Ronaldo was down the middle. But when Fernandes picked up that ball 5 yards inside his own half and looked up, it was Rashford who was in that central area. There was only one place Rashford wanted to go. And you have to put a little bit of blame to those Arsenal defenders. I talk about decision making at that level. I mean, Gabriel, Ben White even, and certainly Saliba are good athletes, Nathan, aren't they? They're quick, they're not particularly slow, but sometimes it's not just about out and out pace. It's about decision making. It's about dropping into the space early and not conceding that space and giving Marcus Rashford that space to run into. And that's what they did. Instead of backing off early and allowing Rashford to have the ball to his feet, they took a chance. They held that line for as high as they could. We see a lot of that in the modern game. They're not the only team that does it. But when the quality of the passes of that level from Fernandes and the time of the run is as good as it was from Rashford at his pace, you can't deal with it. You get exposed, and that's what happened with that second goal. I felt that was the key. You really felt that's when the whole game kind of turned.
It was a real shame to see Rashford go off with potentially a hamstring injury towards the end. Like, 1 goal since January coming into this, that night against Liverpool. Do you see a transformation in him almost happening live on the pitch when he's scoring those goals?
It was like a metamorphosis, wasn't it? We could see it happen before our eyes almost. It's the first time I've seen. He's been in a dark place for a period of time. I'm not really too sure. Maybe one of those people closest to him know the reasons why, but he hasn't been himself, hasn't been enjoying his football. He's been the shadow of the player. Could have burst onto the scene a couple of years ago, and that's a shame. I don't think necessarily you have to be a Manchester United supporter to kind of be saddened by that. I think any follower of football, when you see the qualities which he has, a young player kind of bursting through, to kind of have a big downturn like that and to be really kind of struggling mentally as well, I think you really feel for him, and you only hope he can pull himself through. Didn't look as if that was going to be the case. He was linked with PSG, wasn't he, in the summer? Looked as if he was going to actually leave the country, get himself out of Manchester, get himself out of England to try and find himself and find a little bit of form. But the move didn't happen. He stayed at Old Trafford, And that performance today was absolutely phenomenal. Like I said, Manchester United supporters will be absolutely delirious leaving that stadium today. And like I said, the chit-chat on those trains and those buses and in the car parks and pubs around Old Trafford, it won't be about the impact that Anthony made in that Manchester United team. It'll be about the re-emergence of Marcus Rashford in a Manchester United jersey.
Casemiro again had to make do with a place on the bench. It was Scott McTominay and Christian Eriksen with Bruno Fernandes just in front. What's your sense of that Manchester United midfield and the quality it can have if Casemiro comes in? Like the unselfishness of Christian Eriksen, some beautiful touches. Bruno Fernandes, the quality of the pass though, again, sort of glittered in and out of the game at times. How do you like that lineup of Eriksen playing a little bit deeper?
It's going to be difficult to fit all those players in. I'm not a big fan of the partnership of McTominay and Eriksen in that central midfield. I think if those two are going to play, they need an extra player in there. I think they need to play with three in there. Casemiro's the obvious one. You'd imagine 60 million, the wages they're paying him. You know, at some point he's going to come in there. But he's a very particular type of player, Casemiro. He's not a great athlete, Nathan. Doesn't need up the ground. He likes to operate in that pocket, in that deep line midfield role, really in a midfield three with two players around them. But if you're going to play with that midfield three, you're only going to play with one central striker. You're not going to play with that 10. And now you're scratching your head looking at Fernandes and saying, how are we going to get this lad into the team? We can't get him into the team now in that preferred position as a 10. Do we flip him onto the flanks where he's not particularly as effective? Or maybe do we have to park him on the bench? So they're the kind of decisions which Ten Hag is going to have to wrestle with going forward. But it's good options to have.
You don't see, which I think most people see as the obvious, is that Casemiro just comes in for McTominay. It's a midfield three of Casemiro, Eriksen and Fernandes.
No, because I think that's a lightweight defensively. I think you're open. In a three, I like McTominay in there in terms of his physicality, his athleticism, his ability to get around the pitch. I don't think he's the greatest defender, but he gives you real pace and energy and kind of athleticism in that central area of the pitch. Casemiro in there, as good a defender as he is in terms of reading the game, very one-paced. Eriksen, an attack-minded player, a ball player. And Fernandes as well, who just wants to get ahead of the ball and get up the pitch. For me, even that three you've mentioned there doesn't have that natural balance. For me, it's like Casemiro, McTominay or Fred in that central area, and possibly Eriksen as well. So that's the interesting one. That's what probably Ten Hag's going to wrestle with going forward. But what he's not going to wrestle with after that performance today is whether Marcus Rashford starts in this team. Because of his versatility, Nathan, I think he could make an argument he can play off either flank. If he's looking at Sancho thinking not getting enough from him, very easily flip Marcus Rashford over to the left and possibly accommodate Cristiano Ronaldo at times in that central area if he feels as if he wants to get Ronaldo's quality on the pitch.
No clean sheet, but what about them defensively? You look across the back four, Delo seems to be a manager's favourite. Now, Malacia got roasted earlier on by Saka, but then stuck with it and seemed to get into the ascendancy. And the centre-back partnership of Varane and Martinez. Where are you on Martinez now, having seen him for 3-4 games?
Jordy's out. I've got to be honest with you. Had a rocky start. He got a huge amount of headlines the past couple of games in terms of he's really come to the fore and has shown his personality, and he looks now comfortable in the Manchester United jersey. And certainly his performances have been better, but you can see the kind of limitations which he has. I think he's got to slow himself down a little bit. Looks very forward up for me going onto the pitch, too much so. For me, I think as a central defender, ideally, you need a measure of calmness to you when you're on the pitch. I think that helps you in terms of your decision making. He's got to realise very quickly he can't go and fight every centre forward he comes up against. Physically, he hasn't got the power to do it. So he needs to smarten up a little bit for me. He's got some good qualities, don't get me wrong. He's a good competitor. He's swift enough, nimble enough over the ground. I think he's good quality on the ball. When he looks up, he looks to play forward and breaks the lines. But I think he's just got to mature. He's not there yet. But I think he needs to get better. Otherwise, those little limitations, frailties which he has at the moment are going to get exposed. But I think it helps when you've mentioned that Dalot and Malacia in those full-back positions, I think have defended well. I think they've narrowed up to their centre halves at times. They're giving them some decent cover. And it looks like a reasonably solid defensive line, Nathan, doesn't it? How often have we said that? Again, Manchester United the past year or so, it hasn't happened too often. So I think there's a partnership in the making there, certainly between Martinez and Varane, but it's all about the defensive unit for me. And Dalot is probably playing his best, is having his best spell in a Manchester United jersey. And Malacia has shown enough to show that, let's stick with him. Had a difficult time against Saka today, but he wouldn't be alone in that respect. Saka's as good as they come in that area of the pitch, but he stuck at it, like you said, showed a bit of character, didn't go under, and finished the game reasonably strong. So that's good to see. I think shows he has a little bit of personality.
If I know you, Kenny, you'll be home after this on the couch, scrolling through social media all evening to see what everyone's reaction is. Everyone will be hammering Arsenal that this is typical Arsenal. 5 wins in a row to start the season. First real test.
That's not typical Arsenal, is it? 5 wins in a row.
All the momentum, and they blow it.
Yeah. Now you know, is alongside me, that's not the case. Having watched the game, they blew the game today at key moments. Like I said, individual decision making cost them, but I think the overall play was good, particularly in possession when they found their rhythm and they found their groove. Probably 20 minutes before halftime and 20 minutes after halftime, Nathan, we saw their quality, that front four, some of the link-up play between them. They look very comfortable out of guard in the little pockets, linking up with Saka. It's a funny when he plays the 10 out in guard, but I saw it last year with him. He really leans towards that right-hand side, that inside right pocket. He wants to get close to Saka. He wants to get within 10, 15 yards with him. He's the one he knows he can feed and he can work with little 1-2s and get Jesus into the game. So that front four is probably as good as there is in the Premiership at the moment. Just need to tighten things up in behind.
And when you say in behind, do you mean the two in the middle of midfield? Yeah, I think that's where Arsenal fans question with, as much as Xhaka is playing a slightly different role, it might have started the season well. That's not their strongest two on the pitch today. Well, I certainly wouldn't argue. Partey for me, and possibly Zinchenko. Although I was reasonably impressed with Lokonga today. I thought he was very competent in terms of what he did. I think there's more to come from him. He's a young player. But for me, Kieran Tierney comes back in the team at his best, Nathan. He strengthens them at that left-back area of the pitch. That releases Zinchenko for me into that central area of the pitch where I think he's at his best, because I think Zinchenko has his weaknesses at left-back, particularly in 1v1 situations. You saw him today. He wants to go in and play central midfield. You know, he wants to drift into those central areas. That's where he's most comfortable. That's where he feels as if he can best influence the game. And he doesn't get as exposed in there in that central midfield area, Nathan. He's got players behind him, he's got players around him. Yeah. But in that left back position, big switch to play your 1v1 against Bukayo Saka and Mo Salah, you know you're in trouble, and I think he knows that. So I think there's more to come from this Arsenal team. There's better players who can come into the starting 11 and actually strengthen that team. We could spend the next 2 hours talking about refereeing decisions and VAR, and there was a controversial one in this game, and there's reviews going on into a couple of the matches yesterday where I think VAR are already accepting that they got it wrong. It's all got ridiculously messy.
But it's always been ridiculously messy, and guess what? Get ready. It's always going to be ridiculously messy. So suck it up. For those people who wanted VAR in and continue to want it in, suck it up. That's all I can say. It's not going to go away. There's no solution to this. It is what it is. You're going to have to deal with it. Personally, I didn't want, where my feelings on it. I didn't want VAR coming in, and I'd have it out in a split second, in a heartbeat. I'd get rid of it. No big problem with the decision today. I didn't think it was a free kick. I think the Arsenal goal should have stood. But I can understand there was a bit of contact there. The referee decided to change his mind. I wouldn't have. If the VAR wasn't there in that situation, maybe the referee would allow play to go. We'd all be arguing whether it was a free kick, whether it was a no. But I can take that. I can take individual error from the referee. I'll accept it. That's part and parcel of the game for me. That was never a problem. It's interesting situations. Yesterday you were talking about, again, interpretation. People talk about, well, VAR has to get better. VAR has to improve. But VAR is a fifth official. VAR is a human being. So you might as well be going over and asking the fourth official. It's a fifth official. It's a human being we're asking now to make these judgment calls. So don't be surprised if we're going to be having these arguments. People are going to have to disagree about what's a penalty, what isn't, what's a sending off, and what isn't. It's all about human judgment.
But also, you're saying with these judgment calls, it's meant to be a clear and obvious error. What we're having.
But what is clear? But we can have an argument about what's clear and obvious, Nathan. That argument goes round in circles. Was that today a
clear and obvious error when the referee was standing 5 yards away?
Well, the referee will tell you, because he went over and saw and thought, I've made a clear and obvious error. I'm saying I didn't think it was a clear and obvious error. I'm saying I didn't think it was a free kick. So again, the clear and obvious error argument, it's never going to be resolved, because again, we'll all have our interpretation, what we perceive to be a clear and obvious error, if you understand what I'm saying. So for example, the goal, the West Ham goal yesterday, seems to be a general consensus, disgrace, VAR has to go, this is the lowest of the low with VAR. How the hell could that be overturned and a free kick given to Chelsea? I thought it was a free kick.
What?
I thought it was
he never touches him.
I thought when he clattered him in his shoulder, and he done it deliberately. He left his left leg there. He jumped over Mendy and deliberately trailed his leg to make contact with the Chelsea goalkeeper. That's a free kick. Now, that's how I see it. Doesn't mean I'm right, but that's how I see it. That was clear to me. It was clear free kick. He made contact with Mendy, so Mendy couldn't get up quickly and actually try and make the save. But everybody else saw it differently. Now, that might mean everybody else is right. It may mean I'm right and everybody else is wrong. But this is the judgment that I'm talking about, and it's never going to be resolved. Do you enjoy talking about it?
No.
Do you enjoy talking about these every week?
I don't think anybody enjoys the fact when a goal scores, all you're thinking is that thing that happened 30 seconds ago.
This is what I'm talking about. So you've got to, for me, it's simple, and it's always been simple. Are we getting more decisions right than wrong with VAR? Absolutely. They'd throw the percentage at 8%, 90%, 90%, whatever it is. Yeah, absolutely. Is the introduction of VAR bettering the game, making it a better spectacle for the supporters and the public to watch? For me, the answer is a big, fat no. And that's the biggest argument for me. That's it. That's my argument right there. I don't care for getting more decisions right than wrong. That doesn't bother me. Human error has always been part of the game. Suck it up, get on with it. That's life. But is the game better? Are we enjoying it more? Absolutely not. That's spontaneity, celebrating a goal. Whoa, lads, hold it. Have to have a look at the VAR. Just put down a pause. Let's press the pause button. Let's have a look at it for 2 minutes. Actually, it is a goal. Pick up where you left it. Go and celebrate again. That's spontaneity. Yeah. Let's just replicate that again and celebrate the goal again. I absolutely cringe when I'm watching the football now. That's an absolute shame. And I say that I'm absolutely hating at the moment in terms of the impact VAR is having on the game. It's an absolute shame. People say, well, we can't go back. Oh, we can't go back. And I say, well, why not?
Yeah.
Well, we can't, can we? It's in. But that's it. That's the argument. It's in. That's the strongest argument I've heard, Nathan. It's in. We can't go back.
Not there's been a massive improvement or less controversy. Like, we have more controversy than ever, it feels like. Because even when a decision is made, we're saying, why didn't they go to VAR? Why didn't VAR intervene?
Yeah, exactly. Why didn't they put the flag up early? You know, why didn't they put the flag? Stephen Gerrard, the Aston Villa game yesterday.
Coutinho, yeah.
Yeah, but people are continually arguing, why didn't they put the flag? You can see it's offside.
Well, it's
clearly offside.
That's the consistency where you have the situation with, say, Liverpool in particular, where somebody's 5 yards offside and they continue until the passage of play finishes.
But what if somebody's 4 yards offside? What about if they're 1 yard offside? What about if they're 18 inches offside?
What if they're onside, like yesterday?
Where's the line? Where are we going to put the flag? When are we going to keep it down? Again, circles, Nathan. We're going down absolute circles with this. I'm guessing the TV companies love this. The people who plough money into the game, the huge amount of money Sky beats, I'm guessing they're absolutely love it. Absolute tech nerds, like, can't get enough of it. They'll never vote it out. But I tell you what, I think if you canvass the vote amongst their football and supporters, and actually I think more and more now, actually football people, players and managers alike, I think you'd find the scales adjusted now are weighed in favour of kicking this bloody thing into touch.
Takeaways on the weekend, both Liverpool and Manchester City end up dropping points yesterday. The common line you keep hearing about Liverpool is that something's just not right.
Well, yeah. Well, I've got my own opinion in terms of what's right. It's interesting. I have heard that a little bit, but nobody's expanded on it. So for me, it's relatively simple. You make the argument Darwin Núñez coming in, time to sell. That's okay. That's fine. You can make the argument in terms of a bit lapse of concentration defensively. Van Dijk's a bit off. Yeah, that's absolutely fine, but that can come back. Alexander-Arnold making mistakes. That's always going to be the case. It's always going to happen. Nothing's going to change there. But the big fundamental for me, and it's been there for some time, we probably spoke about it even last year, Liverpool's central midfield, the dynamic has changed in there and it's shifted. It's like those Teutonic plates have just like shifted about 10 degrees. And they've shifted because Jordan Henderson isn't the player that he was 18 years ago. And he can't impact the game as he did in terms of that physical output which he had. Nathan leading the charge in there, that kind of press, counter press, physicality, energy levels which he had in there. Him and Wijnaldum, you remember those two advanced midfield positions. Fabinho in behind, absolutely perfect. Out-muscled, outran, out-pressed, ran over teams, Manchester City included. That's why Manchester City have really struggled with them during that period. But it's shifted. And it's shifted because Jordan Henderson's physical levels have dropped off. And now we're looking at Liverpool midfield with some technically gifted players. Harvey Elliott, wonderful player. Thiago, when he comes in, technically very good. Carvalho, who's come in, interesting player as well for me. Looks like a goal scorer. Physically, he's not going to impose himself too much. And Fabinho now is not looking the player that he is in it because he's getting more exposed. He hasn't got that protection, hasn't got that security blanket around him. He's a very good operator, Fabinho, really good reader of the game, very similar to Casemiro, but he's one-paced. And he can't be running 20 yards to his left and 20 yards to his right, putting out fires. So now the whole dynamic has changed. So for me, Liverpool in transition in that central midfield. So are Liverpool going to be a team now? Are they going to incorporate the likes of Harvey Elliott, Thiago and Carvalho into that central midfield now and go for and run with that? Because that would be interesting, because that's an absolutely sea change in how Liverpool play. And the big question is, ultimately, are they going to be the better team because of it? I don't think they will.
Because at the moment they seem in a sort of limbo of, as you say, that midfield at their best of Wijnaldum, Henderson and Fabinho. Like, the counter-attacks didn't happen, so Liverpool didn't have to defend because they won every duel. They recycled the ball so quickly.
Couldn't get at them. You couldn't get at that back four for the majority of the game.
Now, if you're looking for more technically skillful, creative players, like Carvalho or Elliott could almost play as one of the front three as much as one of the midfielders. Do you need a shift all over if suddenly they're going to become a possession-based team? Like, is that what?
Well, this is for me is the interesting conversation. So it looks like to me Liverpool potentially now are going to take Manchester City on at their
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.